Hello and welcome to the 2 Minute Drill. The 2025 NFL Draft is officially over. And before we move on to 2026, like I'm sure many of you are ready to do, me, Michael Rochman, and Bailey Kumar are here to talk about some of our thoughts on each team's draft. We'll give a grade on each draft, talk about our favorite players from day one, day two, day three. We got it all covered. And then we'll move on with a Monday mock draft that you can look forward to for the 2026 NFL draft cycle. But before any of that, Bailey Kumar, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. The NFL draft, obviously our favorite times of the year. Very solid draft. A lot of fun players taken. A lot of fun landing spots, and can't wait to give grades, give my opinions on all these guys.
Yeah, I mean it's an exciting draft. There was definitely some crazy storylines, some that got discussed at large, all the way into day three, and some that maybe went a little bit under the radar. And I'm very excited to dive into it with you. All right. Well, without further ado, we're going to be going in alphabetical order. So that starts us here with the Arizona Cardinals, and we're going to pull up the draft. We got graphics going on. We got a great team here, but obviously the Cardinals started off their draft with Walter Nolan, added some very impressive talent with Will Johnson, Jordan Birch. And then on day three, they came out and they continued swinging mostly on the defensive side, adding guys like Cody Simon, Denzel Burke, and Catan Crawford, but also added Hayden Connor to their offensive line. Let's start off with day one and the Walter Nolan pick. What type of impact do you think a guy like this can make to a Jonathan Gannon defense that's been looking to bolster the trenches?
Yeah, I mean, this is just the perfect fit for the Cardinals. This is one of the guys that they're heavily rumored to go after, and it's very clear why. Nolan is just such a great penetrator, great fit in kind of that spot that they like to do, the kind of like 3-4 or 5 tech type spot where you can just go in and get after the quarterback. Doesn't even really worry about being a star run defender or any of that. Just half a gap and go after it. And Nolan's such an explosive player. He really showed out for Ole Miss this year, and he was a leader of that defense. This is one of the guys I was super high on come pre-draft. It's not really surprising for me to see him kind of go this high in the draft.
Yeah, a lot of speculation seemed to indicate that Harmon was going to be the guy that went earlier than Nolan. So I was kind of expecting him here, but I really do like Nolan, and I had him graded higher than Harmon for those type of tier two, I guess, defense tackles. This is a guy that I think has a lot of upside. I felt like his base strength was extremely underrated, which makes me higher on his run defensive potential. I think the pass rush is definitely there and exciting. And, we saw it at the Senior Bowl where he was just dominating offensive linemen. And, that was kind of similar to what Quinyon Mitchell did, where he just put on an absolute clinic at the Senior Bowl, and then it was very evident that he was a very good pro at the next level. Immediately made an impact and was a huge part of Philadelphia going on to win the Super Bowl. I don't know that Arizona is going to be hoisting the Lombardi this next February, but I do think Walter Nolan is going to be a very exciting interior defender for this team and for a defense that's been kind of looking for those instant impact playmakers. I think they did a really great job, and that's why I want to transition to day two, where they got Will Johnson, a guy that we had going number 12 in our mock draft. Maybe a little bit stupid on our ends, I guess, but overall, this is a great addition to the secondary. It wasn't necessarily the biggest part of their defense that needed to upgrade, but when you can add in a guy who truly has cornerback one potential for this team, and pair him with Max Melton on a young secondary that was very exciting this past offseason in terms of just like promise being shown, and you're adding an elite talent like that. The speed, the injuries, there's serious question marks, but I do think on film, when you're evaluating what Johnson can do on the boundary, he is a very talented cornerback. And, I don't want to speak too long, but Jordan Birch is another high impact player, very great athlete. I think he was a former 5-star recruit. And, there's just flashes, whether it was at South Carolina or at Oregon, where he was making plays that very few defensive ends of his size can do. And I'm very excited to see what Jonathan Gannon can unlock for him.
Yeah, Will Johnson falling, obviously one of the biggest stories in round one. I don't remember any other prospect following that had as much impact as this. So, Will Johnson, instant starter on that outside defense, at the outside corner position, a position that I feel like the Cardinals desperately needed it. Maybe you didn't feel like they needed that much. Felt that was a clear weakness on their team. They're looking for that shutdown guy, the number one that they can stick on other team's wide receiver one, and Will Johnson's obviously fits that bill. Fell due to injuries. We'll see how much that impacts him. Also, the long speed was also in question, but I mean, you just gotta trust the tape here and trust that you are getting an impact player. I think Nolan Johnson is my favorite 1-2 punch that any team took out of the draft. So yeah, and Birch, I felt it was a bit of an interesting pick. I feel like they went after edge so heavily in the draft. They had I'm blanking on his name last year, the first round pick, Darius.
Darius Robinson.
Darius Robinson, who didn't get to play unfortunately last year due to injury. So they're kind of filling up on the defensive front, but when you add all those players, that is a very scary rotation and a very scary defensive line, and you add to that with a very good receiving depth, and this is sort of corner depth, and this is a very very scary defense that they are shaping up.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily going to hurt Darius Robinson. I think it's just Gannon wants to have that depth to where he can continue to rotate guys on the edge. I think really the guys that are in question is maybe Zaven Collins and Ojulari. One of those guys is probably going to be on the outside looking in when it comes to snaps. And yeah, I mean, it wasn't necessarily that the secondary wasn't looking to upgrade. It's just if they were to head into next season with guys like Starling Thomas and Max Melton, who I felt showed some pretty promising young signs for young corners, it wouldn't have been the worst thing in the world when I felt like the trenches were a much bigger issue. But moving on to day three, obviously some picks that I think make some impact. Cody Simon was a guy that was extremely productive for Ohio State and really kind of flew under the radar despite being so productive for one of the best defenses in the country. They're taking another swing at corner with Denzel Burke in the fifth round. They added Hayden Connor, a piece of a very strong Texas offensive line, and Katan Crawford, safety out of Nevada. Bailey, what was your favorite pick from day three for this Arizona Cardinals team?
I really like the Hayden Connor pick. This is somebody who was very, very good on that Texas offensive line, like you said. And, the big knock against him, but he was kind of not very scheme versatile. Not really a guy you want a lot running zone, but luckily for him, the Cardinals don't run a lot of zones. Right now, the Cardinals starting right guard is Isaiah Adams, who I think was a sixth-round pick last year. So somebody that's not very ideal for a starter. And Hayden Carter's also a sixth-round pick. So creating some competition there, you get the best starter there out of somebody who had a very successful career at Texas. So yeah, that's a pick that I can see starting for them at some point, which is pretty rare for the sixth round.
Yeah, I think my favorite pick, not too bold, but I'm going with their very first pick of day three, and that's Cody Simon. I mean, 6'2", 229. I think he kind of fits in that hybrid linebacker role that these Philadelphia teams have been able to produce with Zach Bond and Jalix Hunt, to where you kind of see that impact and having that additional rusher to where you can disguise who's going to be blitzing on plays. You can just mix up your front seven and rotate guys all around. And I think Simon can kind of do that. He was just one of the most productive players that we've seen in college football in a long time. I think in terms of just like mixing in sacks, tackles, and just pass coverage impact. So he's someone that I think is going to be a highly effective player. And I think that linebacker unit is one that was a little bit overlooked for how much of an issue it was. Kaiser White kind of took some steps back last season, and it really hurt that Arizona second level. And I think if you can get that production out of Cody Simon, a young linebacker, but very talented and definitely experienced for the college game, I think he can really make an impact and help this Arizona team really click on defense to take that next step and potentially push this team into that playoff hunt that they've been looking for.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. So, Michael, overall, what do you get this Cardinals draft class grade-wise?
Yeah, I have to give it an A. I mean, when you are able to get guys that are ranking as high for me as, Walter Nolan, Will Johnson, even guys like Jordan Burch and Cody Simon, who I like as sleepers. I like Hayden Connor as well. Like, there wasn't a pick where I'm saying, what are the Cardinals doing here? I wish they would have went somewhere else. Like, maybe like there's small nitpicks where maybe I have one guy that's like a few spots higher in my rankings, but overall, it's a lot of players that I like, and maybe it's a bias to my own evaluation, but at the same time, like I really like the mindset that they came into this draft with, and I like the players they selected. So for me, I'm giving it an A.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm giving this an A grade as well. I mean, it's hard to give them anything else with how much they kind of nailed those first two picks in my own eyes with Will Johnson and Walter Nolan. Got some solid depth everywhere else. I think the only thing that's holding them back for maybe that A plus is if they didn't really address receiver. We'd like to see them maybe add somebody to that room, which is I think is surprisingly thin with all the additions they've made. But overall, yeah, the Cardinals have to walk away from today, or I guess the last 3 days, very happy with the haul they got.
Yeah, I think the interior offensive line is one that I'm still looking to see those upgrades. But if Hayden Connor can hit in that fifth round, then those doubts are kind of erased, and you can feel a lot more confident heading into next offseason. Moving forward now to the Atlanta Falcons, and this was a team that really made some noise on night one. They drafted Jalen Walker at 15, a guy that really wasn't expected to get that far down based on what we were hearing from some of the big heads in the media. But then they traded back up into the first round with the Los Angeles Rams, traded a future first, added James Pierce to their team. On day two, they added Xavier Watts in the third round. Then the very next pick, they took Billy Bowman, two safeties, a little questionable, but what we're hearing, might move around. And then the seventh round, Jack Nelson. What were your thoughts on this draft? And we'll start off with the first round.
Yeah, this was a very aggressive first round by the Falcons, but I like it. Jalen Walker was somebody who's falling. I think he was a top 10 talent in this class, and getting him at pick 16, I think, is a huge steal for the Falcons. Somebody that can instantly slot into that starting edge role. Even if you want to play him some linebacker, you can. He's a very versatile player and someone that you know that's going to be taken full advantage on by Raheem Morris. Um, James Pierce, this was a very, very aggressive move. Also, trading your future first is obviously very bold, but I mean, we saw this last class, maybe not to the same extent, but with the Vikings trade up of Dallas Turner, and you ask the Vikings, they will do that trade 100 times out of 100 again. So if you like a guy and you see James Pierce, who's somebody who, talent-wise, top 16 player, top 20 player in the draft, you see him falling, you kind of look at your own board, who's the next best guy after James Pierce? Might get a little dicey after that. So go and trade up. This is obviously the biggest weakness on this Falcons roster. And I don't hate them double dipping here. I don't hate them making the aggressive move. This is what teams should be doing. They should be making aggressive moves.
I'm kind of the opposite. Like I like James Pierce, and I think he's going to be a productive player, especially in that Raheem Morris defense. So I can't really fault that move in itself. But I do think it was a little bit of desperation by Terry Fontenot. I think his job is on the hot seat, and he needs his team to really take that next step, make the playoffs if he wants to be here next year. And I think this move kind of reflected that. I like James Pierce. I didn't necessarily feel that he was far and away the next best edge rusher. I felt like, guys like Mike Green, guys that were on the board, maybe like Nick Scorton, could still have that impact. I like James Pierce's fit probably most for that Raheem Morris defense, and I do think that Walker and Pierce are going to be very highly impactful players. I just do question how good this Falcons team is going to be next year, and this trade may not age as well as you'd kind of like. It's really going to come down to where they're picking next season. If this is a pick that's late first, in that 20s range, I'll kind of overlook it and I'll say that's fine. Pierce turned in a good season. The team took the necessary steps. It was all worth it. All comes out in the wash. But if this is a team that maybe underperforms next season and we're looking at them in the bottom 15 picks, I mean, the Rams clearly won it by a landslide. And then you're kind of questioning if this was really a move that was really worth it for a Falcons team that is so desperately looking to continue to build this roster, even past this draft.
Yeah, like I said the word aggressive a lot the first time I was describing this, but the aggressive is very close to risky, which is close to, desperate. Um, And yeah, I mean, I can just picture Raheem Morris begging Fontenot every time the Rams were going off in the playoffs and like, look, look at the pass rush they got. This is what I need. This is what I need. So just finally given to that. And yeah, this is if you're the Falcons and you watched their games last year, how many games did they lose just because they didn't have a good enough pass rush? That problem is easily solved. But the double dip at edge rusher is definitely an interesting idea. I do think maybe the roster isn't quite as good as they think it is, like you said. So we'll see how this pans out to them.
Yeah, so looking at the next three picks, we're just going to combine day two and day three since they only had a late third. Xavier Watts with their third round pick, Billy Bowman with their fourth, Jack Nelson with their seventh. Bailey, do you have a pick that kind of stands out from this group that you want to talk about?
Uh, I'll let you talk about Xavier Watts. I'll talk about Billy Bowman because I think this might be a confusing pick for some people. Is like they just took a safety, they already have Jesse Bates, but I think the Falcons said that Billy Bowman's been playing nickel for them, slot corner for them. So this is a great move for them. They really struggled in coverage last year. One of the worst teams, I believe, in coverage. Like obviously you have some really good pieces with Bates and with I keep blanking on players' names. I don't know what's going on with me. Um, who's their corner one?
AJ Terrell.
AJ Terrell, I don't know what's going on. But you always need guys there, and Bowman is kind of undersized, but he's perfect for that slot role. Can also provide some versatility to their safety as a third safety and things like that. So that's a great pick in round four in my eyes.
Yeah, and talking about Watts, I do think he's going to be a very effective player in the pros. Playing off of Jesse Bates is a huge benefit for him to where he can kind of rely on the instincts, but maybe those athletic shortcomings that were kind of evident on tape and both in testing really aren't going to be as impactful when you're playing opposite of a guy like Jesse Bates who can cover so much field and can cover the downfield situations to where watched him kind of run around. The big thing for Watts, though, is he's going to play in that strong safety spot, and he needs to prove that he can be a more effective tackler because I think his missed tackle rate was in the 20th percent for just how many times he was misfiring. That's going to be a huge concern, especially playing closer to the line of scrimmage. He needs to make those plays, and he needs to be more dependable, or else he may find himself, sitting outside and watching guys like Jordan Fuller, who are more reliable veterans who can make those tackles. And, then you're kind of wondering on the development path if he can kind of find his way back onto the field, especially if the confidence takes a hit in that situation. And I do want to talk about Nelson. He's a guy that I think kind of went underrated in the draft cycle because he was a shorter limb tackle. But I mean, it felt like every tackle in this class was that. He's not spectacular, but I do think he is very dependable, very reliable. And it wouldn't shock me if there's someone that kind of works his way into this lineup somehow, some way, or works his way into becoming like a reliable next piece up, whether it's at tackle or at guard. And I also want to say, I believe they signed Joshua Gray as an undrafted free agent, who I really like at the center position. And it would not shock me if Joshua Gray, despite being an undrafted free agent, is the day one starter at center for this team.
Yeah, so all in all, Michael, what are you giving this Falcons draft class in terms of a grade?
I gave it a B. I do think the players are impactful. I like the first three selections a lot to where I think these guys can step in and really help elevate a defense that kind of needs those next steps. They made it a high priority. I didn't love the trade, so there's a little bit of a knock on that. There are some positions that I feel like could have been addressed that didn't get anything added to this roster, especially, on the defensive line at cornerback, maybe adding another tight end in case Pitts doesn't take those steps. But overall, I feel like the Falcons really made it a goal to improve the back end of their secondary and improve their pass rush. And I feel like they effectively did that to where I can still sign off on this draft, even if it's not necessarily the exact approach I would have taken.
Yeah, I gave this draft a B plus, and I don't disagree with you. I think I'm just a tiny bit higher on the Falcons' outlook. I think for the future, I think you got your offense set, got your QB, got your offensive line, you got your wide receivers, you got everybody. Um, and the defense is really what held them back last year. And the division is still very vulnerable. The Buccaneers are, kind of a team that's might be aging out. Getting older. They struggled to stay healthy last year, so the division's wide open for them to take, and they may not get another chance like this to take over the division. And I think their 1 year outlook is extremely strong, but years 2 and 3 might get a little risky. So that's why I'm happy here at a B plus.
Yeah, it's a very interesting outlook for a very young and exciting Atlanta Falcons team. We'll see how it ages as we head into this 2026 season. But moving forward to a team that is already in the thick of their expectations and championship chase, the Baltimore Ravens came into this draft not necessarily need heavy, but definitely some need to kind of make those next steps, hit on some draft picks, and they had a lot of them. So we'll go over the first section of picks, and then we'll talk about day three later. But first round, they got Malachi Starks, a safety out of Georgia. With the second round pick, they added Mike Green, edge rusher out of Marshall. And with their third round selection, they added Emory Jones, offensive lineman out of LSU. We'll start with Malachi Starks, but Bailey, what were your thoughts on this Ravens draft?
Yeah, this is a pretty typical Ravens draft, but with a slight twist that they actually did go need, but just so happens the BPA lines up with a need, which just seems to happen to them for some reason every draft. Malachi Starks, obviously such a versatile player, and you really opens up Kyle Hamilton where they move Kyle Hamilton out of his normal role, and their defense just crashed. And sometimes you want to line up Kyle Hamilton in different looks. You don't want to just pigeonhole him into one role. So this allows them to, I think, really open up their defense in a way that we haven't seen, or we haven't seen in since Marcus Williams was a contributor.
Yeah, it's a huge get, and I think both for the Ravens and for Starks, it's great to have Kyle Hamilton there to where Starks can really kind of play in his own role, play in that free safety position, let Kyle Hamilton roam a little bit closer to the line of scrimmage to where he can make plays on the football, both behind the line of scrimmage, dropping back, playing in the box, wherever you need him. He's gonna be a star. And I think with Malachi Starks being able to play on that back end, use his athleticism, showcase his range, there's gonna be a lot of exciting plays from this duo. And I think they're gonna be one of the top safety tandems for years to come. I think this is really an exciting selection. And then they continue to hit on picks in day two, where Mike Green was someone that we talked about as a potential top 15 pick. Obviously, I think he was a little bit overrated when it came to that evaluation, but I do think a lot of the drop came due to off-field concerns with the potential issues there. But I mean, the Ravens seemed okay with taking it, and I do think in terms of just generating pressure off of the edge. There's no team who really does it better than the Ravens. So getting a guy like Mike Green, who's a pass rush specialist, who is just so nuanced with his hands for a smaller school guy, for a smaller edge rusher, he's finding ways to the quarterback. And in a Ravens scheme that just capitalizes on creating pressure, he's going to be someone who absolutely feasts, and it might be a very scary year one impact for a second round rookie. And then Emory Jones is a guy that early on in the summer scouting section, I loved Emory Jones. I thought he was going to be one of the top tackles. He definitely took a step back, and I think maybe I was just a little bit too high on what those steps would be for him. But whether he's in at guard or out at tackle, I do think there's still potential here for Emory Jones to make an impact. And in this Ravens scheme, I think he's probably going to be a guard that can really still kind of showcase that physicality and that just overall natural play strength and the physical hands to where he can still be a high impact offensive lineman on an offensive line that really it was all right on the interior, putting some guys in that maybe were not necessarily the most experienced, but they still made it work. For a younger guy who's more malleable in terms of development, I do think Emory Jones has a little bit more upside than like a Daniel Falele, to where you can kind of see the offensive line maybe take those next steps if Emory Jones is able to take those next steps in his development.
Yeah, Mike Green's obviously, I think, the story in this day too. Like you said, if top 15 talent, honestly, if Starks and Green went top 15, I'd be like, oh, okay. I'm not super shocked by that. So the Ravens getting them at 27 and 59 is obviously a big steal for them. And like I said, this is a need for them. They definitely need an edge rusher. And Mike Green's one of the most talented edge rushers in this class. Obviously, there are some of the off-field concerns with that, but clearly the Ravens either did the research and decided that it was enough of a risk, or that I don't know, but clearly they felt comfortable enough to take him at 59, where I mean some teams took him off their board. So I don't know. We'll see. This is a high risk, high reward pick for them, and then their day three is looking very long, Mike. A lot of picks here.
Yeah, I may need to catch my breath here in between, but we'll start off with the fourth round where they added Teddy Buchanan, linebacker out of California. Then they went to the fifth round, Carson Vincent, offensive lineman out of Alabama A&M. And then we go to the sixth round where they had five picks. Bilal Cohn, the cornerback out of Western Michigan, Tyler Loop, the kicker out of Arizona, LeJonte Wester, the wide receiver out of Colorado, Aeneas Peebles, the defensive lineman out of Virginia Tech, and Robert Longerbeam, cornerback out of Rutgers. And then on the seventh round, they got Garrett Dillinger, the offensive lineman, teammate of Emory Jones from LSU. Bailey, do you have a favorite pick from this haul? I mean, there's a lot to choose from, so I hope you at least have one that you can talk
The,
about.
Probably talk about all these guys, but I'll probably think I'll stick with Aeneas Peebles. This guy is somebody I thought was a top 100 player in this class. The biggest thing with him is you just got to figure out his role. Where are you really going to play him? Where are you going to deploy him out of? And I'd really trust the Ravens and their defense to figure out what the best spot is for him. There's somebody who might be maybe just like a pass rush specialist, or I mean, you don't really have defensive tackles as pass rush specialist, but of a penetrator specialist, let's just say that, as you continue to develop his game. And maybe he's somebody that you don't ever define a role for. He's more of a secret weapon, or a guy who gives you versatility and lets you line up in a lot of different looks. But getting this guy in the sixth round, I think, is a huge deal for the Ravens, and I think he's somebody who is going to play in the defensive tackle rotation right away.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about Bilal Cohn because he's 6'1", 190, and someone that tested pretty well in terms of play speed. I don't think his jumps were super great, but I still feel like he's a very smooth, physical corner that I think fits out on that boundary. This is a Ravens team that definitely has some talent at cornerback. Nate Wiggins is exciting. Marlon Humphrey is one of the best slot corners in the game. But you kind of need that second boundary corner, especially when Brandon Stevens was kind of not super consistent last year. He left this offseason and they added Chidobe Awuzie. You're looking for that next guy. I don't think Awuzie is much more than a stopgap bandage type of option. Maybe Armour Davis is able to kind of take those steps. Maybe TJ Tampa can take those next steps. We'll see. But overall, the position is very much in flux. So if you can get Cohn to kind of step up, fill into that position, and be the long-term answer, that's an absolute hit. And I really kind of love these guys that have the size, have the physicality, have the production, have the athleticism to where you can kind of buy into what that upside is. He's a smooth mover. He looks very composed when he plays. And I think that kind of natural comfort is so big in terms of cornerback play to where I'm excited to see what he can do in this Ravens scheme that is no doubt favorable to their prospects.
Absolutely. So, Michael, what are you giving this Ravens draft class in terms of a grade?
Yeah, I give it a B plus. I really do like Malachi Starks. I think he's a high end safety. It wouldn't shock me if him and Hamilton are one of the best safety tandems for years to come. Like I said earlier, I didn't necessarily feel like the rest of their picks were like insanely high impact. I felt like a lot of their day three selections were at positions that were maybe lower in terms of just like overall need, which may make it more effective on finding hits in that range. But at the same time, I would have liked to see more just guys that can make those splash plays that can maybe make that next impact. If Cohen can do it, that's great. You know, Buchanan's a guy that I think a lot of our close friends in the draft industry kind of seem to like. Mike Green, I think, is going to make an impact off the edge. This is a good Ravens draft, but it wasn't one that necessarily wowed me. So that's what held it back from reaching into that A territory. But B plus for me, still a very good draft. And with so many dart throws, you're bound to get some good hits.
Yeah, I give this an A. I think the upside of Starks and Green is just too much for me to ignore. Two really, really huge needs that they nailed and got maybe two like top five players in the class. Maybe Starks is the best safety, and then Mike Green's like a top five edge rusher. It's really hard for me to ignore that. And the rest of their draft, I feel like there's a lot of talent and upside here, and they filled out their depth. I feel like the Ravens' depth might have been thinning a little bit over the last couple of years, and this is a really solid, like, kind of restocking the cupboards type draft where they have guys that they like and they have guys that they can develop. And I don't know, every year I might just give the Ravens an A. I just love their draft philosophy and how they attack every draft.
Yeah, I think that's more than fair. They're an exciting team, and it's definitely going to help for these young guys to be in such a strong organization to where that development comes a little bit easier. But moving forward to another very good team, the Buffalo Bills made plenty of impact with their draft, and we'll start off with the day 1 and 2 selections. With the first round, they got Maxwell Harrison, the cornerback out of Kentucky, and then they followed it up with two more SEC players: T.J. Sanders, the defensive lineman out of South Carolina, and Landon Jackson, the defensive end out of Arkansas. Bailey, talk about these 2 days of picks and what your thoughts are on them.
The Bills are just the most predictable drafting team ever at this point. You just know what they're going to do. Maxwell Harrison, a good player, probably like some other corners in this spot, but he is somebody that they really needed. They really need another outside corner. Their depth there is not great. He's probably going to start day one. I'd be very shocked if he doesn't. And he kind of completes that CB room um of Taron Johnson and Christian Benford. So that's a really solid unit now there. TJ Sanders is somebody who I liked in this range. I maybe a little top of his range, but I'm a bit confused on the path of playing time for him here. They already have Ed Oliver and Sanders is a three tech, so maybe he's rotational. Maybe they'll pass rush to line them both up. So I'll be interested to see how they deploy him. And Landon Jackson is just the most Bills pick ever. I don't even want to talk about him. It actually kind of annoyed me that they picked him. Just too obvious. What are you thinking about this, Michael?
Yeah, I didn't love Harrison. Honestly, I was a lot lower on him in evaluation than a lot of people were, and I don't want to bang too much on a prospect that I think still has upside, and obviously is playing this year injured, so maybe it wasn't the cleanest evaluation for me. But overall, I felt like there were prospects that I like more. Trey Amos, especially, I feel like it's going to be a star, and I think it's one that we may look back on and say the Bills really regretted. And I'm with you on Sanders. You know, I think he's a really high end prospect and really exciting player, but I am kind of concerned on what the plan is for this defensive line because we'll talk about Deion Walker later, but even he's not someone that I necessarily want at nose tackle. TJ Sanders and Ed Oliver are kind of redundant if they're going to be running a lot more 3-4, trying to vary up their defensive looks, you know, for whatever looks they're trying to do with that defensive line, that front seven. Then I get it. And, you know, there's some that can definitely be said there. You know, you look at the Eagles and they just have like a heavy rotation. So maybe the Bills are trying to do that where they can have Ed Oliver one drive, TJ Sanders the next, and they continue to remain fresh. We'll see what happens. I think the impact and the talent is there. It's just a little confusing in terms of just trying to figure out what the projection is for these players and what the role will be. But I trust the Bills to be smart with it. Landon Jackson is a guy that I think really fits that scheme, and I agree he's definitely a very Bills player. But at the same time, I do think he has the talent and upside to where he can continue to develop. And if you're able to get him in between that Epinesa and Rousseau type of talent range, that's still a great addition, especially in the third round. So I don't hate it at all, and I'm excited to see what this day 1 and 2 selection haul for the Bills can become.
Absolutely. I'll let you take a breather. I'll take over to the day three for you. So for day three in round four, they took Dan Walker, defensive tackle out of Kentucky, Jordan Hancock, corner out of Ohio State, Jackson Hayes, tight end from Georgia Tech, Dorian Strong, a corner from Virginia Tech, Chase Lunt, offensive tackle from Connecticut, and they finished off with Caden Prather, wide receiver from Maryland. Michael, did you have a favorite pick out of these guys?
Yeah, I think my favorite pick for this haul was Dorian Strong, cornerback out of Virginia Tech, a guy that is very instinctual, very physical. And if you look at his statistics, just based on PFF, so maybe not the most surefire statistics, but definitely a good indicator. He's someone that has been a lockdown corner for like 3 straight years at Virginia Tech. He has been very limited targets, very limited completion rate, and good ball production. He is a star corner, and I think he's going to be one of those steals where Buffalo just seems to shine with late round corners, and Dorian Strong just fits that bill to a T. This is a cool haul in terms of just like the upside and talent that they added, especially in round six. Both guys I think are very talented, but Dorian Strong probably takes the cake for me as the guy that I like the most from this group.
Yeah, I also really like Dorian Strong. Like we said, the Bills' offensive or sorry outside corner room is kind of thin right now, and so I can definitely see Dorian Strong as kind of that cornerback four. Benford's been pretty injury prone lately, so maybe he'll see some starting snaps if they go down or if somebody else goes down. So yeah, I really like that pick too. But I also really want to highlight Dean Walker as somebody who I feel like is almost redundant with the other players they took. Maybe they're gonna force him to play one tech, which I think maybe it's a bit of a mistake. Maybe have him behind Capon Jones and have him kind of translate his skill set, kind of recomp his body a little bit for a better fit there. But I think that's kind of a sleeper, interesting pick.
Yeah, I feel like he's very similar to Jordan Phillips, who is on the Bills now and was on the Bills a few years ago as well, to where maybe they have this ideal role for him and they can figure it out. But he's definitely still got to develop and add some weight in that anchor, really unlock his full potential. But the potential is there. This is a guy we were talking about as maybe a top 10 talent in this class in this past summer. So definitely maybe a little bit of a misfire on that, but the potential is there for him to be an exciting player still. And I'm excited to see what the Bills do with him. Moving forward to the Carolina Panthers, they
Well, real
opened
quick,
up.
what's your Bills grade? Can't forget about the
Oh,
grade.
moving on too fast. I gave it a B minus. I think the big issue for me is I'm not a Maxwell Harrison fan. Bold prediction. I'll say it's very similar to how Elam and Benford worked out, to where the first round pick ended up not working out as much, but the later round gem really kind of flew in and saved the day. So I'll make that prediction now. Maybe it looks foolish, but I B minus. I like the talent of guys like Sanders, Jackson, Walker, Strong. Even Lunt is someone that I think is going to be an intriguing piece on that offensive line. But there's definitely some pieces of this draft that I wish could be upgraded a little bit.
Yeah, I gave this Bills class C plus. This is just a classic Bills draft, like I said, and this is almost the definition of insanity at this point. You have to try something new. You got to change something up. Is it like I really would like to see a wide receiver here with a little bit more upside, maybe a field stretcher, a faster guy instead of just taking a lot of backups, which is what they ended up doing. Add something that's gonna expand your offense. This is a very defense heavy draft for them. So yeah, I don't know. C plus. Like I can't hate too much on the players they took because I do think they're really talented players. But I think in a couple of years, maybe it will be a lot more clear what the Bills had in mind with this draft class.
And next up is the Carolina Panthers. And with the eighth pick, they surprised people. They went Tedero McMillan, a very exciting receiver. Then in the second round and third, they added edge rushers. With pick 19 in the second round, they added Nick Scorton. And with pick 13 in the third round, they added Princely Uman Mielen. Bailey, this is an interesting day one and two for the Panthers. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, I feel like overall they did a pretty good job addressing their needs. Obviously, they need more weapons for Bryce Young. Ted McMillan is seen as the best wide receiver in the draft, and then they also need some pass rush help. So this is like a solid day one, two for them. I'm not in love with the value of these guys. I would like to see some more higher upside guy. Like, what is Ted McMillan really adding to that wide receiver room? Would like to maybe see a guy with speed there. I mean, obviously, like the only other options are Matthew Golden, but maybe trade back, maybe do someone else. I don't know. But if they think Ted McMillan's far and away the best wide receiver in this draft, I don't hate to pick then. Yeah, but like to see some maybe higher upside picks from them the first 2 days.
Yeah, I think first and foremost for this Carolina Panthers team to work out, Bryce Young has to be a star quarterback. And, the end of the season was phenomenal. Like, it was a great turnaround. But it's easy to imagine a path where, he kind of reverts back to some old habits. And we say, oh, we probably got too excited over a short stint of good play. And what you have to do is try to give him the best opportunity to succeed. And they did that by adding McMillan. Obviously, player evaluation aside, like, getting who you perceive as the top wide receiver is a great way to kind of establish that maybe 3 rounds or 3 straight years of grabbing a first round wide receiver isn't the most exciting thing for Panther fans. But I mean, Mingo's already gone. Leggett is exciting, but I do think that he isn't necessarily going to be that top guy. So getting someone who you believe can be that established top wideout while you still have Thielen in town, while you still have Coker, who's kind of progressing into becoming a very exciting kind of under the radar receiver. And while you can still hopefully get that production out of Leggett, you're filling up that receiver room to where the job becomes easy for Young to succeed. Not just, oh, if he can be the best player, then maybe this team can make it happen. Make it to where the job is easier on him. You look at situations like Jacksonville where Trevor Lawrence kind of struggled, and a lot of it is because, maybe he was doing too much. If you can make the job easier on your quarterback, the development comes a lot easier, and I think the Panthers did that here. With their day 2 selections, I like Scorton. I think he kind of fits that mold of that bigger edge rusher that is still playing a lot of stand-up opportunities in that Vero defense, and I think he's going to fit in well. Umon Mielen, I'm not as high on, but I think overall this is about the draft range that I think people were expecting for him, maybe even a little bit lower than expected. So it's decent value for what the consensus opinion was, and it's a team that definitely needed to bolster their edge rushing presence. So I like the picks in terms of just addressing needs for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And so moving on to day three, in round four, pick 114, they take Trevor Etienne, running back out of Georgia. At pick 122, they take Lathan Ransom, safety from Ohio State. Pick 140, Cam Jackson, defensive tackle from Florida. Pick 163, Mitchell Evans, tight end from Notre Dame. And 208, they finish up their draft with Jimmy Horn, wide receiver from Colorado. Michael, what are you thinking about this day three?
Yeah, I really like the day 3, and I want to talk specifically about Trevor Etienne, a guy that I had extremely high above the consensus. He was my third favorite running back in this class, behind Henderson and Ashton Genty, obviously. But this is a guy that I think has big playability. Jonathan Brooks has been dealing with some injuries. He came in off of a big knee injury and had another one that he suffered this year. I don't know what the future is for Brooks, and it's unfortunate because the talent was there as a prospect, but the injuries just piled up, and now it's a murky future. Chuba Hubbard's a very talented running back, but obviously I don't think he's necessarily someone that they want to have as a bell cow in that backfield. I think they'd like to have some guys that are making it easier, having a healthy rotation to where both ball carriers are fresh. I think ETN can be a high impact player, especially in this Canales scheme where he loves to get his running backs producing in the passing game, loves to get them outside. I think ETN's going to thrive in that role, and I wouldn't be shocked if this is someone that looks like an absolute stud in this offense and is a huge sleeper in this class.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a bit sad about Brooks, but that seems to be with this ATN pick what they're signaling. For me personally, my favorite day three pick, or maybe not my favorite day three pick, but the one I think will be the most impactful is Lathan Ransom. The Panthers safety depth is pretty terrible. I think he's very clearly the third best safety in that room. He might even be the second best. The only competition he really has for free safety snaps is Richardson. So, I mean, he could start at the end of the year. I wouldn't be so shocked by that. I think he is a pretty good fit by the Panthers to kind of address that need there in day three.
Yeah, they added Morgan. I mean, there's still some optimism about Richardson or Scott maybe being that strong safety, but I don't think it's really set in stone that either one's going to be like a serviceable long-term starter. So if Lathan Ransom can kind of make those steps and be a sneaky impact player, that strong safety spot, it wouldn't shock me. I feel like the safety class in terms of the rankings were pretty jumbled past like the Starks and Emon Warriors of the class. So I don't hate Ransom at all, and I think he could be an interesting high upside strong safety that really maybe not high upside, but sneaky good value here in day 3 to where you can get a starter out of that player, and I think that's always great value. So overall grade, what are you giving this Panthers draft, Bailey?
I gave it a B. I really like the players they took. They really very clearly, I think, went into the draft with a plan. They knew what they had to attack. They kind of knew how the board would fall, and I feel like they did a really good job at filling the holes that they felt like they need. I probably disagree with their evaluation of their own roster, but I mean, at the end of the day, that's the team is always going to be a little bit more high on their own guys. So I would have maybe done some stuff differently, but if you're the Panthers, I feel like you are happy with this draft.
Yeah, I also gave it a B. There's definitely some evaluations that I differ from the Panthers in terms of players that they selected, but just overall impact, I think you're getting a lot of nice impact players that needs to happen for this roster. You made the job easier on your franchise quarterback, which is exactly what you need to do. That's priority number one this offseason is finding ways to continue to upgrade for Bryce Young, and I think they did that. So if McMillan is even just like a solid, maybe Pittman, London tier receiver, and maybe never takes that next step of elite, you're still adding a very good pass catcher for an offense. And I think a lot of people kind of lost the plot when it came to McMillan in that regard because he can still be a very like solid receiver, and that's a great pick here at number 8. So a lot of teams would take that, and I think the Panthers will be more than happy as long as he's offering at least what his floor is, and there's still plenty of potential on top of that. Moving forward, though, to the Chicago Bears, a team that came in with a lot of question marks about what they were going to do in this draft because there wasn't necessarily this huge need on the roster, glaring weakness, but they continued to stick to their own draft board. They took Colston Loveland with the 10th overall pick over Tyler Warren, which was definitely straying away from the media consensus opinion. In the second round, they had 3 picks. They had Luther Burden, they had Ozzie Trapillo, and they had Shamar Turner. Bailey, what were your thoughts on their first 2 days of selections?
Yeah, Loveland's definitely the most intriguing pick out of, I think, everyone in the first round. I don't think this was like a very nailed to pick. I feel like if people thought the Bears were going to take tight end, they would look at Warren instead. But Loveland to me really fits that kind of Laporta vibe that Ben Johnson likes. So I definitely see the vision with him. In terms of this round 1 selection, deploying how they want to use Laporta, but maybe a little bit more upside, a little bit of a better Laporta. On round 2, I think they lost the plot a little bit. Luther Burden, I really don't understand this pick. I think ideally with Loveland, when you still have Cole Kmet there, you want to use him in the slot a little bit. You have DJ Moore and Roman Dunze, who you also want to use out of the slot a little bit. And then you take a slot receiver who's going to eat into their snaps. So I'm not sure if I see the usage path for him here, but Luther Burden's a very talented wide receiver, very good guy. And then Shamar Turner is somebody who I think is a good player, but when you look at the DTs they already have on the roster, I feel like this is not that great of a pick. This kind of does a lot of the different stuff that, or does a lot of the same things that a lot of DTs on the roster already do. I feel like if you're the Bears, you came into this draft with pretty much only 2 needs. You need a running back and a nose tackle, and not addressing them within their first 4 picks, especially when all those picks were in the top 62, is I don't know if I can get behind that.
Yeah, it seems like they prioritize the passing game, especially with those first 3 picks. They got Ozzie Trapillo, who probably is going to be like a flex lineman for this team, but he's someone that has that pass rushing or pass blocking upside, very quick mover. But the pass catchers with their first 2 selections, Colston Loveland, Luther Burden, I think the talent's there to warrant it. I just question the need and the overall fit. Loveland especially, I think tight end is a position where the talent can be there, but a lot of it is about the opportunity for volume at the tight end position. And when you have guys like Roma Dunze, DJ Moore, and now you're adding Luther Burden, when you have Cole Kmet already in that offense, the volume opportunity for Colston Loveland is a little questionable to where I'm not sure if he's going to be able to perform up to top 10 pick expectations. Now, the Bears were a weird situation where the roster is probably better than a top 10 pick, so it's fine to kind of reach into luxury with that selection. I just think that it's a little questionable in terms of just roster building because I would have liked to see them go with maybe like a Kenneth Grant or maybe adding another pass rusher off of the edge. And I think I would have preferred that a little bit more. Still, I think Loveland's going to be a very good player, so I'm not going to knock them too hard on that. I think Luther Burden's going to be a very good player. I do kind of question the rest of this draft, and we'll talk about some of their day 3 selections, but I didn't love Trapillo just on tape. I feel like he's a guy that you're kind of relying on as this pulling tackle, but he's a short stepper, and I didn't feel that he was as athletic as a lot of people have hyped him up to be. On tape, there's just a lot of glaring issues for me, and the play strength is still something that really needs to be developed. Obviously, he's not someone you need to step in immediately, so maybe the development path is a little cleaner, but I wasn't super high on him. Shamar Turner's exciting. I do like him. He's someone that added a lot of weight and maybe wasn't as effective as what he was when he was that hybrid edge rusher. So maybe if they want to kick him back outside or maybe if they want him rotating between both spots, I'll be more intrigued. But at his current play style, I was a little less impressed with him. So we'll see what happens there. I'm more than open to the idea that Texas A&M just kind of stunted his development a little bit, and there's more upside there. But moving forward to day 3, 4th round pick, Ruben Heapolite, the linebacker out of Maryland. Definitely kind of like old school Mike, but he ran 4.42 at his pro day. So very intriguing upside or at least athleticism there that maybe wasn't thought about prior. Zoff Frazier with the 5th round pick, cornerback out of UTSA, long, lanky, and very athletic. Luke Newman, the offensive guard out of Michigan State, someone who definitely flew under the radar during the draft process. And Kyle Monangai, running back out of Rutgers. Bailey, I have a feeling I know where you're going with this one, but who do you want to talk about for their day 3 haul?
I'll talk about Mononga. I did the two-man drill on him, and I know you're a big Zoff Frazier guy, so I'll let you take him. Mononga, uh, I am not in love with this pick, honestly. I feel like when you take a guy kind of the late day three, you're looking for more of a committee guy. And I think Mononga is more of a three down back. He's a guy you kind of has your RB3, and you're like, well, our RB1's down, and RB2 is more of a third down guy slash, power guy. So we'll let Mononga take over, kind of like what the Panthers did with Chuba Hubbard. He might take over the backfield. I'm not in love with the other kind of running backs the Bears have on their roster, but I think would have liked to see more of a committee guy, somebody who kind of gives you some more upside. You can kind of feel more confident just using him in certain specific situations. So, yeah, he is my favorite out of these day three, but I feel like it's just because I'm not very high into day three.
Yeah, I don't hate Mononga as a seventh round pick at all, but I think when I look at this team, I would have loved to see them draft a running back earlier. And I know Ben Johnson had this super successful rushing attack in Detroit. So a lot of people are going to be very defensive over the idea that he knows what he wants and he's not going to force a need. But I mean, guys can be wrong or guys can overlook great talent opportunities in this draft. And I think Ben Johnson or whoever was making the decisions for this draft did that here because you had an opportunity in a very deep running back class to bolster this running back room. I think a guy like Rashard Smith, who fell to the seventh round as well, would have been very exciting in the sixth round or something for this team to where you could plug in that Jahmyr Gibbs role, and maybe you don't want to emulate the Detroit backfield entirely, but I think finding someone who can handle that workload and kind of be exciting and splashy would have been huge for this team, especially to make the job easier on Caleb Williams. And they failed to do that until the seventh round. And even if Mononga is someone who is able to earn that role, I don't think he's someone that really has that high upside to where I question the investments here because you had a roster that was very sturdy, like very dependable on paper. There's a lot of impressive strengths to this team. You needed a running back that can really kind of run away with that room. I'm not sure about Swift long term. I don't think Roschon Johnson is much more than a rotational back, and I don't think Mononga has a very high ceiling swing here. So I'm a little disappointed on the overall approach to this draft, not necessarily the players that they selected. But for a guy I want to emphasize from this day three haul, Zoff Frazier is a very exciting, kind of productive, developmental line defensive back. I mean, who had some really impressive plays. It wouldn't shock me if this is someone that we're talking about as a safety in a little bit because of the overall ability to cover field, to open up when he's striding and just create some impressive highlight moments. He's someone that's very intriguing at the cornerback position. The NFL seems to be very effective at developing these types of project corners. I wouldn't count out Zoff Frazier as a guy who can maybe make an impact in that secondary, whether that's at safety or cornerback in the near future for Chicago.
Yeah, Zoff Frazier's arms are very exciting. So, Michael, what overall would you give this Bears draft class?
It's tough because I do think the talent is there. Like, I love Loveland. I think Luther Burden's a very talented wide receiver. Guys like Zoff Frazier, Kyle Mononga in the seventh round. Like, I don't hate those picks. Shamar Turner in the late second, I think, is good value. But in terms of approach, I feel like there was way too many needs that got ignored, way too many opportunities to upgrade the roster and make other picks maybe have an easier opportunity to continue developing, and they failed to do that. So with this draft, I have to give it a C. Whether or not these guys like Loveland develop, that's not really the question for me because I think Loveland's going to be talented and it's going to be a fun player. I just think that there were opportunities for other needs to be addressed that the Bears failed to do. And if we see those issues pop up this year, it's going to be easy to say, like, yeah, obviously, like you had that opportunity to upgrade those positions and you just ignored it. So I didn't love the work from Poles this year, and I feel like I've been higher on his past drafts, and there's still been some big issues on the field for this team.
Yeah, I originally gave the Bears a C. I think I'm not gonna knock them down to a C minus after we talked through it. I mean, there's some good players here that they took, but just but like where they took them and their fit on the roster, I just don't know if I see it with this draft. This is not kind of the draft I think any of us were expecting out of the Bears, which is why maybe we're just a little bit lower on it because he kind of went and did some stuff out of left field. But I don't know. I can't get behind this draft. I can't endorse it, so C minus, unfortunately.
But I think it's fair. Sometimes you have to be critical. Maybe it ages poorly because Loveland's like a star tight end. And again, it's not really necessarily about the players. It's just I feel like the approach was wrong, and that's where the grade knocks down for me. Moving forward, though, to the Cincinnati Bengals, a team that desperately needed to fix their defense, came into this draft and did so. They added Shamar Turner in the first round. They added Demetrius Knight in the second round. Whether or not you agree with the evaluations, they were heavy on approaching that defensive line or that front seven. And then they added Dylan Fairchild in the third round. Bailey, what are your thoughts on their first 2 days of selections?
I love the Shmar Turner fit with the Bengals. This is exactly what they need. Get that guy opposite Trey Hendrickson. Very, very solid run defender. I think a very underrated run defender. And, he has obviously the physical tools and the upside to develop into a legitimate pass rusher. I feel like this is a guy that maybe some of the more analytical community will dislike just because of, kind of his production at Texas A&M. But I don't know. We're going through all these Texas A&M guys. You're like, oh, like this is not the ideal role for him. It's not the ideal fit. So maybe they're shoving a bunch of square pegs through round holes in here. And in the NFL, we'll see kind of these guys unlock and go into their true position, what they're meant to do. And Demetrius Knight, the Bengals, when you look on paper, the linebacker room's fine, but this was a huge spot, huge issue for them last year. And it's no surprise that they double dipped here. And then Dylan Fairchild, I think, it's a solid startable guard for them.
Yeah, I really love Shamar Stewart, and I think the fact they fell to 17 is great. Luck and fortune for the Bengals. I think he's going to be someone that really develops well and eventually reaches that next step. Obviously, I think a lot of people were looking at this Bengals draft as instant impact players, and I think Stewart is a little underrated for what he can do on day one. I do think there's some flashes that he still has in the system to where he's going to be an instant contributor. It's just maybe that production and pass rush upside is still something that's going to be untapped right now, and that's okay. Obviously, there's questions of what they did on day two, and I think that's fair. Demetrius Knight is a fun, very physical linebacker, nice athleticism, good size. But I think the overall question for me is just like there's more needs on the interior of this defensive line that I think would have been really nice if they would have been able to add some defensive tackle talent in this class. But instead, they went Demetrius Knight. I get it. But then they continued on with Fairchild on the offensive line. That's fine too. But then they added Barrett Carter on day three, Jalen Rivers, and Todd Brooks with their day three haul. I think that's where I start to kind of question it because the interior defensive line was something that desperately needed to be fixed. Creating interior pressure is a way to set up obvious opportunities for the rest of your defensive line. I feel like adding Sheldon Rankins was fine. Or did they even add Sheldon Rankins? They added who was it that they added to this team?
I can't remember. They did definitely go to their
They
defensive tackle though.
they added Slayton, so it was a run stuffer. They still have BJ Hill, but overall, I feel like the pass rush on the interior was just like something that they just did not address here, and I think that's a huge oversight because creating interior pressure is a great way to set up your edge rushers. And Trey Hendrickson's obviously going to succeed. Shamar Stewart is someone that you're looking forward to in the future. Miles Murphy's a nice edge rusher to continue to have optimism about. But you need to address the interior, especially when you were able to kind of get lucky with Slayton hitting the free agency market to where you can fill in that nose tackle role. BJ Hill is a dependable, kind of sturdy, like dependable three tech, whatever. But you need someone who can kind of be a pass rush specialist on the interior. And I feel like they failed to do that, even with guys like Aeneas Peebles, who fell so late in the draft. They just did not swing on it. And I think that's going to be something that they regret.
Yeah, the Bengals draft looks like they're just missing one pick, and what it comes back to, I think, is the double dip at linebacker. When you take Barrett Carter at 119, where you already took Demetrius Knight, and you already have Logan Wilson, Jermaine Pratt once off the roster, fine, let him go. But I don't know if you can really justify this pick of Barrett Carter at 119 when you see the issues at safety, you see the issues at defensive tackle. Even at tight end is a little bit murky. Maybe a tight end would have been fun there too. And then Taj Brooks is a bit of a luxury pick. But in terms of my favorite player on day three, even though I just kind of criticize the pick, I do think Barrett Carter is my favorite player there. I think he's somebody who has that kind of three down potential, play him in a lot of different roles, and a lot of different things. I think that's why they took him. Demetrius Knight is a bit more of a specialized guy, I think, and Carter's the guy you can kind of ask him to do coverage, ask him to blitz, ask him to run stuff, and he can kind of do it all.
Yeah, I think Carter's the best player that they took on day three. And I don't necessarily hate Carter as a talent. I would have liked to see them grab Carter in round four and then maybe go somewhere else with that second round pick. Obviously, you got to adapt to the board if they had Carter high enough and just didn't think he would be there later on. And then he was, and they made the adjustment. Fine, I get it. But I don't know. I really didn't love the overall approach to this draft. And I felt like, in terms of my positional rankings, which I understand I'm not all knowing, but it's just like how I viewed this class versus how they approached it. I feel like there was a lot of variance, and that's where it kind of leaves a sour taste in my mouth. Todd Brooks is someone that I felt like was a little underwhelming at the running back position. I would have loved to see them add like a Damian Martinez or even maybe like a Raheem Sanders who kind of went undrafted in this class. I felt like he would have been more exciting than Todd Brooks. I don't know. There's just a lot of intriguing options in this running back class that I felt like played a little bit better off of Chase Brown that the Bengals passed on. And Brooks is a fine, like productive runner. I just feel like the upside for what he can bring to the table is a little bit underwhelming. Jalen Rivers is a guy, whatever, he's depth. I didn't necessarily love his tape. Uh, it it's just I feel like they compacted all their picks after that first round where they said, okay, linebacker, guard. And there's a lot more issues for the Bengals than just, oh yeah, let's add some more linebacker talent and let's add a little bit more interior line talent. So disappointing. But if I have to talk about one guy for this team that they added, I'm going to go with an undrafted free agent, Seth McLaughlin, who signed from Ohio State, tore his ACL in this season. So that's probably a big reason why he went undrafted compared to being a day three pick. Maybe not the best profile in terms of just size and length and everything, but he put together a really good season for Ohio State and was a promising piece of that offensive line after transferring from Alabama. I think he's going to be someone who sticks around on that roster, plays that second fiddle to Karras as that second string center, eventually takes over that job when Karras either gets older or maybe Karras kicks out to guard. We'll see what happens. But I think Seth McLaughlin, someone to watch who I think can stick around in the league and is going to be a great addition from the UDFA class.
Absolutely. So, Michael, what grade are you giving this Bengals draft class?
Yeah, so I can't consider the UDFA haul much. I actually just do the draft picks alone. And for this draft, I'm giving them a C plus. Uh, I really do like Stewart. I think we're going to look back on Stewart and say, wow, I can't believe the Bengals got him at 17. They didn't have to move up. They didn't have to do anything. They just stayed put and got a great defensive end. The rest of this class, there's a lot murkier of an outlook, and I'm a little concerned in that regard. Still, I think it's a decent class. I feel like addressing linebacker, addressing guard is fine. It's just I didn't like the fact that they double dipped for those positions after that because I just think there's a lot more questions for this Bengals roster that was not addressed this offseason.
Yeah, I gave it a C. I feel like this is kind of like a typical Bengals draft where there's some good players in here, and without context, I feel like you'll look back on this and be like, yeah, they got contributors, they got some good players here, but in the context and take a look at their roster and what happened to their team last year, I feel like this kind of draft is just I don't want to say unacceptable, it's just so underwhelming to a point where I would be hard to get excited about this Bengals defense again next year. It's just hard for me to kind of get behind the idea behind this draft here. A lot of it is riding on Shamar Stewart, who, like we said, is a very good player, but he still is raw at the end of the day like, as a pass rusher. And I feel like you wanted to see a little more out of this class, and I feel like the Bengals just didn't hit it.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. I mean, obviously, it was like historically bad year for the defense and historically amazing year for the offense. If the offense can continue and the defense improves, I mean, this Bengals team is still going to be competitive. So we'll see what happens for them in 2026. But moving forward to their in division rival, the Cleveland Browns, who made headlines all throughout the draft. They traded from the number 2 pick, went back to 5, added Mason Graham. In the second round, they added Carson Schlesinger, running back Quinshon Judkins. And then in the third round, Harold Fannin and Dylan Gabriel. This is an interesting first 2 days of picks. I want to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I really hate this trade back from 2. I think they got really good compensation from it. Don't get me wrong. Like first and the second is great. But you take Mason Graham, who's somebody I'm not like super high on, and he's a good fit. He's a good fit for the Browns need. But the drop off from Hunter to Graham is not something that I feel like the Browns can afford to do. And then you get Carson Schlesinger, who I loved as a linebacker. You know, when you look at this linebacker class, there's not a lot of starters, and he might be the best pure linebacker in this class. I feel like a lot of the other linebackers in transition to edge, so he's going to be a leader in that defense. And with GOK, kind of having a murky future, he's somebody that I definitely feel like was a need. And Judkins was a need too. The running back room is kind of full of question marks. With Fannin, I don't love the fit behind the Joku. I kind of they do similar things. I would like to see maybe a pass blocker, or I mean more of a blocker if they're going to go in the 10 round, but route. But ideally, even defense here. And then Dylan Gabriel is an interesting fit, interesting pick considering what they do later in the draft. But maybe we'll talk about that in combination on day 3. What do you think about it, Michael?
Yeah, I like the trade back. I felt like when you're getting QB compensation for a player, it's almost always worth it if it's not a quarterback. And I feel like Travis Hunter is going to be a phenomenal player in the NFL. I don't have any doubts about that. But when you're able to move back to 5, add additional first round pick, add an additional second, like there's a lot of exciting intrigue with that. And I think Mason Graham is going to be a very good player on this defensive line. Apparently, Myles Garrett selected him himself. So it's a very exciting addition. And I do like the other picks. Schlesinger is a guy that maybe I wasn't as like amazed by, but I think he's a very high floor linebacker that's going to be very dependable. And in that Brown scheme, it definitely makes sense with what Jim Schwartz likes to do. Quinshon Judkins, we've seen a lot of hype about him as like the running back one from last summer, and I still think that the upside is there to be a very good running back. They added Dylan Sampson. We'll talk about that obviously with day three, but I think they upgraded the running back room for an offense that needs that running game to be thriving in order to succeed. And I like Harold Fannin, obviously. I think he's a power slant or power slot that isn't necessarily going to face a lot of pressure of being like the star of the offense like he was at Bowling Green. And I feel like that was the big thing that had me hesitant on Fannin was just like, oh, what am I going to see from him in the NFL? Is some team going to expect him to be their starting tight end who's a lead producer for this team? And they are underwhelmed by the athleticism. But I think he can be like that Gerald Everett type where he's playing that tight end two role. And I think it can work for the right offense. And I think the Browns have that right plan in mind. Look, Gabriel in itself, I don't want to be unfair to him and assess the rest of the draft, but Gabriel himself, if you're talking about quarterbacks within 10 yards, he's probably the best quarterback in that range. He throws absolute darts in the quick game. He can be that effective game manager in the quick game to where I understood the pick at the time, just based on Gabriel alone. I understood it. And I feel like there's coaches out there that just think, look, I just need a guy who can do the job. I will make sure the job gets done. And I think that's what the appeal of Gabriel was. So I wasn't necessarily like blown away by Gabriel being like a late third, early fourth type guy. It was just a little bit more shocking when you add some of the additional context of the draft with it. But overall, I'm excited about what the Browns did, and I do think that they are building in the right direction. They absolutely misfired on Deshaun Watson, and it's going to cost the organization. But when you recoup some of that lost value with a trade back like this for Hunter, I get it a lot. And I do think it was a little bit of a response to a misfire, but I still understand it. And I think you have to address it and approach your team in that way because of what the misfire was. So I like the trade back, and I like what they did with this first 2 days.
Yeah, moving on to day three. Only two picks for the Browns, but two pretty consequential picks, I have to say. At pick 126, you take Dylan Sampson, running back from Tennessee, and at pick 144, Shedeur Sanders, QB from Colorado. Slide stopped there. Michael, got to give your thoughts first, man. What do you think about these two picks?
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy that Shador Sanders ended with the Browns. I mean, I feel like we just didn't hear about it on the broadcast at all for day three. Like they just wouldn't talk about it. I don't know. Like seventh round, all these picks happening, they just refuse to talk about Shador all day. But we're willing to on 2 Minute Drill. We're not afraid to talk about what the broadcast just wouldn't shut up about. But ultimately, Shador is what Shador is. I mean, there was like character concerns and whatever, and I feel like it's very feasible that back in the combine when he was getting mocked in the top five in almost every mock, he believed that hype and he probably was a little bit passive and maybe a little bit condescending to teams that were outside of the top 10 and rubbed a lot of teams the wrong way. And then eventually fell out of favor with the teams that were inside the top 10. And then he ended up in this slide situation. I think Sanders is going to be the quarterback that prevails in this battle. I think he has the upside. I know a lot of people love to dunk on him when the fall is happening and be like, oh, yeah, actually, this is just a terrible QB that doesn't know what he's doing and everything about him is awful. Shador is still a good quarterback. Don't like fall back off your evaluation just because the slide happened. Like the talent is still there. He's probably one of the most consistent passers in all levels of the field. The stats back that up. If you look at his heat map, like he's the only quarterback that is productive at every like area level third of the field all over. And I just think he's going to find his way back into the starting position. He'll get an opportunity to prove himself, and it wouldn't shock me if he ends up earning time as the starting quarterback for the Browns for this year and maybe next. And then Dylan Sampson, I wasn't necessarily as high on him, but he's a steady runner, very consistent contact balance, very nice pass blocker as well. I think he'll find a way to produce and find a way to carve out a role in this backfield for a Browns offense that loves to use two running backs.
Yeah, I mean, I'll cover Sampson first. The double dip at running back for the Browns is not something I was a fan of. I think Judkins has the three down back potential. Jerome Ford is not a bad backup. Pierre Strong's not a terrible RB3. This is a pretty premium pick that they use. This is like pick, I mean not super premium, 126, and you have a lot of other needs on that roster. Like this is a team that still picks second overall. Your roster's not that good to be doing stuff like this. It seems pretty arrogant to me. And then Shadur Sanders, there's been all the analysis of him will be beaten to death, but in terms of context of kind of this QB competition, I would not be surprised if Dylan Gabriel wins that job. This feels like Gabriel was the Stefanski pick, and then Sanders was the Haslam pick, and so you got to take this guy. So I mean, I feel like Gabriel's is a much better fit for what Stefanski likes to do and his offense. And but I mean, Shador has the more talent. Is the more talented passer, so we'll see. That's gonna be obviously all eyes on that QB competition this offseason. Plus, with all the vets, with the Browns brought in. So, all in all, Michael, what are you grading this draft?
Yeah, I give it a B plus. I think the big thing for me is I believe in Shador Sanders, so I'm willing to kind of give more optimism to it. I think Mason Graham's a high level prospect. I think Schlesinger, Judkins, very high floor players, and I think Shador can be a franchise quarterback. So for me, I mean, you kind of hit on a lot of positions with maybe not the most capital because of the past trade backs and everything, but I do think that they were able to capitalize on this draft and the opportunity that they had in front of them to where I'm more optimistic heading into the season on what this can become, and I'll give it a B plus.
Yeah, I was a lot lower in this. I graded this a D, but probably give it up a D plus after looking about this class again. I just you lose Hunter, and then Mason Graham is somebody that I think you're a lot higher on than I am, but I don't love it. And then Carson Schlesinger is somebody I love, and then the double running backs, the double QBs, and then Fannin, and I just don't like this draft. I don't know what to say. The players here are fine, but it's just like the overall philosophy and the kind of the way they attacked this draft was just something that I was just head scratching to me, and not what a team does in the division that they're in, how they should be approaching draft like this.
Yeah, I understand it. If both quarterbacks aren't really able to prove themselves as a long term answer, then they've wasted a lot of assets in this draft and they move forward. But I don't know. I like the swings here. We'll see what happens for Cleveland, a team that definitely looking to kind of take those next steps after misfiring with Deshaun Watson. But moving forward to the Dallas Cowboys, a team that really kind of made some headlines with their approach to the first three rounds. They added Tyler Booker at pick 12, something that I think was shocking, but not necessarily in a bad way. Then in the second round, they added Donovan Ezraku, edge rusher out of Boston College. And then the third round, Siobhan Revel, cornerback out of East Carolina. Bailey, these are three guys that wouldn't have been necessarily the most shocking as first round picks. Are you loving the Cowboys draft?
Yeah, loving it is a bit of a stretch. These are three guys who are definitely considered first rounders. I wouldn't be like totally shocked to see them first rounders. Personal evaluation, a little bit off. Tyler Booker, I think, is a really good pick. I feel like there's a lot of concern with a post Zach Martin offensive line for the Cowboys look like. So getting that transition was is really good. Booker is a really good guard. There's talks of him falling on the first round. That was not going to happen. He's too good for that to happen. There was somebody that when I do my 2 minute drill on him, somebody I fell in love with him as a prospect. So I think it's a plug and play starter. As a Rocky was somebody who was considered a first rounder, I probably would have taken him the second. And then Revel is somebody who I probably would have taken the second too. Obviously, the ACL tear is a big concern, but this is three needs they hit, three we'll call them premium positions for the Cowboys, and they did a really good job.
Yeah, this is a weird situation because I wasn't necessarily as high on all these guys as the first round grades that they had. I was a little lower on Booker, a little lower on Ezraku, and a little lower on Siobhan Revel. Maybe not lower on Siobhan Revel. I think I was just about high second for Siobhan Revel, so maybe not first round grade there. But overall, I think it's solid. I think the needs were addressed pretty well, especially on the offensive line and making sure that they got a guy that they love. I'm going to trust that they're going to develop anyone that they take because it seems like when they take those interior linemen, they just absolutely ace it. I like Booker as a power guy, and I feel like the athleticism is a little underrated because he was this power guy, but he dropped some weight and he moved decent, and he still remained like a very powerful player. Ezra Rocco, I think, is the big question mark here for me. I wasn't as high on his speed and just overall ability to generate force as an edge rusher, so I question what he can do. But when you're playing off of Micah Parsons, there's definitely that upside and that potential to kind of just be a cleanup sack guy, and there's nothing wrong with that if you have the team for that. So Ezraku is someone that I'm looking for, and if he can really kind of prove me wrong and play that edge two, second fiddle type guy that still cleans up and is fairly productive with 7.5 plus sacks most seasons, like that's a really great get for this team.
Absolutely. Moving on to day three, the Cowboys were busy. They took Jaden Blue, running back from Texas, Shamar James, linebacker from Florida, Ajanani Cornelius, defensive tackle from Oregon, Jay Toy, defensive tackle from UCLA, Phil Maffa, a running back from Clemson, and Tommy Akin Gives I'm not know how to pronounce his name. I apologize. Defensive tackle from Maryland. Michael, what do you think about this draft?
Yeah, I feel like they did all right with this day three haul. I would have liked to see them address running back a little bit better. I'm not a huge Maffa guy. I feel like Jaden Blue is kind of like a receiving back more than anything. If they're that high on Javonte Williams, then I think Blue's just going to be playing that rotational spiel for him, and they're going to work it out. Then that's fine. I understand it, but overall, I wasn't super high on their running back room heading into it, and I didn't feel like they addressed it enough to necessarily solve the issues there. A guy that I want to talk about is Johnny Cornelius, a guy that played tackle, right tackle for the Oregon Ducks. I think he's going to kick into guard, and I think he's a very good one. He has the overall body torque and power and great size and physicality that I think he can really be an impact player on the interior. And whether that's at right tackle, stepping in for Steele, or whether he gets a chance on the interior, I think this can be a high impact player, and I think he's going to be an exciting steal here in round 6.
Yeah, for me, my favorite pick had to be Jaden Blue, running back out of Texas. No, you may not be big as a fan of this pick, but I feel like when you're picking this late in the draft, what you need to do is pick guys who are going to be good in committee. And Jaden Blue does have kind of the upside to be that receiving back in a committee. Yeah, he's not a three down guy, but he's still somebody who can definitely contribute and, is a very electric player and might, be able to kickstart this Cowboys running back room to something that is at least serviceable.
Yeah, he's an electric receiving back, and I think he has the acceleration that most backs don't have in this class. So there's definitely still upside. But overall, talking about grades for this team, what do you give this Cowboys draft as a full grade?
Yeah, I like this Cowboys draft. I give it a B. They had a really good day one and day two. I think day three might have slipped away from them a little bit. Maybe some more questionable picks here, but overall, I can't hate on the actual impact players they got, which is the first 3 rounds.
Yeah, I feel like the Cowboys' identity is the offensive line. Even though they've drifted away from the stellar play that they once had, they still have continued to address it when there's any glaring needs on the offensive line, and they continue to do so here with Booker. And I'll trust the process. I think it'll work out, and if not, I do really like Cornelius. So I gave it a B. I didn't necessarily love all the players that they picked, but I feel like they addressed their needs pretty well to where I can't hate on the draft too much, and we'll see how it plays out. Moving forward to the Denver Broncos, a team that outperformed expectations last year, went into the draft, maybe not a lot of needs, took Ja'Day Barron with the 20th pick. With the 28th pick in the second round, they took RJ Harvey. And with the 10th and 37th pick in the third round, they picked Pat Bryant and Savion Jones. Bailey, this is an interesting draft for the Broncos. What do you think of it?
Yeah, I think a lot of people had the Broncos kind of locked in at running back or maybe wide receiver in the first round, but they went a little bit off the board. They went Johnny Barron, which, from what I understand, like there's no way this guy's going to fall to us. And when he did, they're like, we can't pass this up, even though maybe we have bigger needs. Barron's too good of a player, and I respect that approach. I completely understand it from a team building aspect where if a player's too good, it's too high on your board, you just simply can't pass on them. And he's a day one start for them. He will slide in to that nickelback room or sorry, in that nickelback slot. And that's a good cornerback that they got with Pat Surtain and Bradley Moss. And now they got Johnny Barron.
Yeah,
When
he
you
go ahead.
go ahead.
I was just gonna say he's an exciting playmaker and he's someone that has a knack for finding the football. And we've kind of seen with Brian Branch where that slot defender can still be very impactful to a team. So while the positional value may have some people questioning it if he is a slot guy, I still think the impact is there. And moving forward to their day two picks, RJ Harvey, Pat Bryant, definitely I think a little bit off the traditional consensus board in terms of where they were taken compared to other players at the position, but. I mean, Sean Payton has never been afraid to go to the beat of his own drum, and I feel like he did that here with his day two selections.
Yeah, Sean Payton's definitely made I think shocked a lot of people with the Bo Nix selection last year, and he's again back with these shocking picks. RJ Harvey is definitely not what I think people were expecting at pick 60. Some of the running backs on the board I think were higher. A lot of people had like at least consensus, but they do need a running back. They really needed one. A lot of people have them going running back round one, and they go around two. Maybe not the guy they expected, but still, somebody who does have that three down potential, somebody who kind of fits what Payton looks for out of their running backs. And Pat Bryant is somebody who, again, taking a little higher than I think consensus would have liked, but they need wide receivers. Their wide receiver room isn't complete, and Sutton, who knows what the future holds for him. So I don't hate the players. I mean, I don't hate the positions they took here, but the players may be more of a question mark.
Yeah, so when you look at the day three picks, they had some interesting selections with their fourth round pick. They took Q Robinson, a pass rush specialist out of Alabama. Then they took Jeremy Crawshaw, the punter out of Florida, first punter off the board. And then Caleb Lohner, the tight end out of Utah. Bailey, some very unique selections here on day three. What'd you make of it?
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie to you, I'm not very familiar with any of the players they drafted here on day three, so I might have to defer to you here.
Yeah, I like Hugh Robinson for what he is. He's a pass rush specialist, and I think if you get that rotation for Nick Bonito to where you can kind of keep a very juiced up pass rush guy, there's some upside there. And I think Hugh Robinson can fit into that Denver defense where they have this kind of designed role for a player like him to operate and maybe succeed. And I wouldn't be surprised if he's someone who definitely is second fiddle to a guy like Bonito, but can make an impact when he's stepping in for a few snaps every game and is still able to keep that fresh and intense motor going. Crawshaw, good punter. Loner, probably a specialist type of tight end, not necessarily someone that you're expecting to be this like star player at the position. But I mean, there's some value for these guys, and I think Sean Payton has a specific role for Loner in this offense, and it wouldn't shock me, especially with how involved they kind of got just like a random array of tight ends in that first year when he came to Denver.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Michael, what are you feeling grade-wise for this Denver draft haul?
Yeah, I'd say with the players that they selected, I got to give it a C. I respect, sticking to your gun, sticking to your own draft assessment, but I still have to do that with my own grading scale. And I wasn't necessarily as high on Harvey or Pat Bryant, so I'm a little bit lower on this class. I do like Barron, but I feel like the rest of this class lacks that impact and upside that I had when evaluating the players.
Yeah, I gave it a C minus. I'm similar to you. I do like the positions they attacked. I do like Johnny Barron's kind of the jewel of this class, but again, he's still a nickel corner, not the most impactful player. And then kind of the impact players they did get aren't guys that I've either seen or particularly high on. So I can't give this anything higher than a C minus, unfortunately. But this could be a very good draft for the Broncos.
Yeah, I mean, if you have a designed role for him and you're high on him, you absolutely have to take him. So I understand the selection process. It's just sometimes doesn't align with the analysts that we have here at 2 Minute Drill. Can't ask for better quality though. So moving forward to the Detroit Lions, a team that is looking to kind of take those next steps. They've been on that Super Bowl hunt, and they look to do. They look to accomplish that with this draft. Started off with Tyleek Williams, the nose tackle in the first round, added Tate Ratledge in the second, and then Isaac Tesla, the wide receiver, in the third round. A very unique set of picks, but something that I think some people are appreciative of. Some people are maybe a little bit more hesitant. Where do you stand, Bailey?
I am on the hesitancy side. I did not like Tyreek Williams in this range at all, especially to the Lions who had, I feel like, bigger needs. It's just one of those things where I feel like they start overthinking it. They start looking, okay, what does the roster look like in 2026? And you can't do that when you're in the position of the Lions, and you need an edge rusher. At the end of the day, like it's inexcusable to leave day two without an edge rusher. And Tyler Williams is a good player, and he kind of fits the Lions mold of what they look for, and he's going to be a good like defensive tackle for them. But is he going to play year one that much? I am not so certain. I mean, he's stuck behind DJ Reader, who is a free agent at the end of the year. So when they lose, they have a replacement for him. But are we really drafting backup nose tackles in round one with the Lions roster? I am not sold on that. I do like the Tate Rowledge pick, on the other hand, and like he's going to be a starter for them at guard. He is a great scheme fit. This is what the Lions should be doing. This is a great pick for them. And then the Slaw is not somebody that I think a lot of people are shocked to go here. It's always some team was always going to take a shot on him in round three. And he has the upside, but I'm not sure I see the vision with the current state of the Lions wide receiver room.
Yeah, it's a very unique draft, and I like Williams as a player. I definitely understand the hesitancy of taking a nose tackle round one compared to the need edge and maybe some other positions on this roster. Still, I do think Williams is going to be a good player, so I don't necessarily question it as much. But yeah, leaving day two without an edge rusher is really rough for the Lions, who really fell off whenever they lost Hutchinson last year, and they didn't necessarily address the position in free agency. They brought back Davenport, but I don't know. There's just still some question marks with this team. Rattledge is a good offensive guard. I think he can really fill in for that right guard position and compete with Mahogany, compete with Frazier, who they picked on day three. And someone's going to prevail from that group and be a very contributing starter. Slaw, speedy guy. I don't necessarily know if he's going to get a lot of action in this passing game, but if he can create a few impact plays over the season, take the top off the defense, there's definitely opportunities to set up the other receivers in this offense. So we'll see. I wasn't super high on their day one and two picks, but I didn't necessarily hate any player specifically, so I can't bash it too much.
Well, let's hope your opinions change on day three, where they pick up Miles Frazier, a guard from LSU, Ahmad Hassan, an edge rusher from Boise State, Dan Jackson, safety from Georgia, And then round seven to finish off the draft, they take Dominic Lovett, wide receiver from Georgia. Michael, who kind of stands out for you in this group of guys they got?
Yeah, I really like Frazier. I think he's a really aggressive and well-built offensive lineman, and there's really only one spot on this Lions offensive line that's open for opportunity right now, but I do think Frazier and Ratledge are going to compete well with Mahogany, who I also like as a prospect. So I'm excited to see what the young guys can do for this Detroit offensive line. I expect business as usual with that protection scheme and run game opportunity.
Yeah, I also highlighted Miles Frazier as the guy I like most in day three. Graham Glasgow is getting up there in age, and you did bring in Tate Ratledge, but you do need backup guards. And Frazier was somebody that I wouldn't have been shocked to see go in day two, like in those top 100 range. And I feel like the Lions are a good developmental place for him to kind of maybe work out the things that made him fall in the draft. I don't really know why he fell. I would let maybe this like injury related or character related, but I'll have to go look that up after. But yeah, I really like this pick for them. And Michael, overall grade wise, what are you thinking for the Lions?
Yeah, I got to give them a C plus. I feel like the mindset just wasn't right for what the Lions are looking at heading into this draft. They need to swing on more impact players. I've been a defender of Brad Holmes whenever he had the Jahmyr Gibbs and Jack Campbell picks that everyone swore was just terrible. I said a lot of these guys are going to be impact players and they're going to be like players that age well whenever we look back on the draft later on. This draft, I didn't feel that so much. I feel like this is a situation where they need to be aggressive, kind of find impact players and take high priority positions of need to really kind of help this team take those next steps as they look to make that push for Lombardi. And I feel like they lacked doing that in this draft.
Yeah, I'm a bit lower on you. I give them a D. I like Tate Ratledge, but Tyler Williams and Slot are just not. I don't see it. This is not the type of draft that the Lions have after the season they had. I feel like they're hand waving a lot of their problems due to injuries, which I mean that could be fair, but you kind of had to set yourself up better to handle those injuries. You got to set yourself better to kind of those pieces that are leaving. I feel like are two in the forefront of their mind where they're not really looking at the 2025 season, maybe 2026. So I would have liked to see a bit more urgency in this draft, a bit more kind of going heavier at need than BPA in their own mind.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it works out for the Lions this season. But a team that's hoping it doesn't work out too well is the division rival Green Bay Packers. In the first round, they added Matthew Golden. On day two, they added Anthony Belton and Savion Williams. A very interesting haul. Two receivers, probably not expected for a team that hasn't drafted a receiver in the first round. And I don't know how long what the stat is, but it's been a very long time. What were your thoughts on these picks, Bailey?
I mean, Matthew Golden, I think, was yours and mine, wide receiver one. So getting him at 23 is great for the Packers. Kind of had that muddled wide receiver room where like, oh, it's a bunch of wide receiver twos or wide receiver ones, but maybe it's a bunch of wide receiver threes. So they kind of need that alpha in the room, and Golden is the guy who I feel like could add a lot to that room. He is offers something different than I think some of the guys ever other offer, and he fits in well. You can fill in kind of some different roles. You play him inside, you play him outside, and it's kind of a dream pick for them at 23, Michael.
Yeah, I didn't have him at wide receiver one, but I still really do like Matthew Golden. He was my wide receiver three in the class, and I think he can be a wide receiver one for an offense. I think the production profile is something that a lot of people like to nitpick, but he's still a very efficient, fluent, and very technical wideout that I think can be that wide receiver one for a Packers team that kind of desperately is searching for that. It's a little intriguing to see them go wide receiver, especially because it felt like heading into last offseason, they felt really optimistic about one of these young guys kind of taking that next step. Maybe Jaden Reed was supposed to be the guy this year as we kind of saw the year progress, but I don't know. There really wasn't that alpha in the room, and I think that hope is that Matthew Golden can be that while Jaden Reed continues to kind of be that productive slot guy, and maybe Savion Williams can be that new utility guy in the offense. So we'll probably see some moves happening during this offseason for some of the other guys in that room. Anthony Belton's the interesting pick for me here, though, because Rasheed Walker's a really good left tackle, but his deal is not going to last very long. So maybe they let him walk and just continue to produce offensive linemen. Andy Senovich is one of the best offensive line developers out there. And I mean, Anthony Belton has all the tools to be a successful left tackle. So it wouldn't shock me if this is the Packers' long-term answer at left tackle going forward.
Yeah, just a quick clarification. I forgot Travis Hunter existed at and considered wide receiver, so Golden's wide receiver two for me.
Yeah.
I
Also,
think
I think I said Andy's Adam Stenovich. So apologies there to Coach Stenovich.
yeah, I thought the double dip of wide receiver was definitely interesting with the room they have. I don't really see how Savion Williams fits into that room. And Belton, again, looking for the future left tackle, who knows how long Rasheed Walker's there. Bit surprising go edge or corner in this first day too, but maybe day three they'll address it. So looking at the day three, they took Barron Sorrell, an edge rusher from Texas, Colin Oliver, another edge rusher from Oklahoma State, Warren Brinson, a defensive tackle from Georgia, Micah Robinson, corner from Tulane, and John Williams, offensive line from Cincinnati. Michael, what's standing out to you about this day three?
Yeah, I really love Barron Terrell. I think he's someone that is going to be a sleeper edge rusher in this class, and I think the opportunity is there for him to earn snaps for a Green Bay team that kind of lacked finding that impact player from Lucas Van Ness and Kingsley Enagbari, and I think Brandon Cox even got a lot of snaps, but he wasn't really able to make that impact for the Packers. So they're looking for that edge rush presence. Even Rashawn Gary, I think, wasn't as productive as a 4-3 defensive end compared to when he was operating more in that 3-4 base formation. So it'll be interesting to see if Sorrell can kind of earn an opportunity in this offense or in this defense, where I think he has a lot of great traits to be a successful pro.
Yeah, I'm with you on Sorrell. I really liked him at Texas. I felt like he was a bit miscast in his role at Texas, honestly. I feel like he's a better fit for what the Packers run, and they need guys in their edge room. And how can you not love that draft announcement when he shows up at the draft and gets that big cheer from the crowd? So definitely somebody that you're rooting for to succeed.
Yeah, I will say there's a little bit of concern with Matthew Golden wearing number 22 in the NFL. So that's the big question mark right now for if he can
Instant bust.
succeed. But we'll see. Talented player, just questionable choices off field, I guess, or on field. Moving forward though to the Houston Texans, a team
Michael,
that
the grade. You got to get the grade.
I forgot about the grade. All right, so for a grade for me, I gave him a B plus. I think the players are all there to where I don't have many question marks about the way they went about this draft. Definitely a little bit of issue in terms of just going wide receiver twice when I felt like there were some other needs on the roster, but I think the talent is there with the picks to where I understand the direction and I'm willing to overlook it.
Yeah, I gave him the C minus. I feel like the double dip of wide receiver is pretty inexcusable. You need a corner, you need an edge rusher. Take one a little bit higher. They go and they do address those later on day three, but Savion Williams is just not a pick that I like. And then Anthony Belton is a really talented player, but when you've been churning out these productive offensive linemen late in the draft, I feel like taking around and taking one in round two is a bit of a luxury pick. Get an edge player, get a corner, but I mean, at the end of the day, the Packers are just higher on their own roster, which I understand. They had a really successful year, and they probably would have gone further if it weren't for some unfortunate bounces. So yeah, we'll see how they turn out in 2025.
Indeed. Now moving forward to the Houston Texans, they trade away Laramie Tunsil, went into this draft with a lot of question marks about what they were going to do. Ended up trading back from round one, had 4 picks on day two with Jaden Higgins and Ariante Ursary as their first 2 picks, and then Jalen Knoll and Jalen Smith with their third round picks. Bailey, this is an intriguing group, 2 wide receivers in it. What do you think of the Texans' haul?
I love that. You got the Iowa State teammates there, a wide receiver, Jaden Higgins, and Jalen Noel. Two players that are, I think they add something different to the Texans room where, you have your long-term piece in Nico Collins, but you're looking for the number two and you're looking for the number three. You do have Christian Kirk on the 1-year deal, and, who knows how Tank Dale's going to come back, if he comes back at all. And so I feel like these 2 picks here are kind of indicating that this is the room going forward. It's going to be Collins, Higgins, and Noel. Get used to it. That's going to be the future there. And Ursary, I feel like it's a really, really good pick. This is somebody I was really high on coming pre-draft. I had him as a top 20 player probably. And, he has that offensive tackle versatility if you want to play there, if you want to play him there. But, he also has that guard day one ability that where I feel like he's going to compete. And, when you look at the guard room, you could easily start.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest. I hated when they traded Laramie Tunsil. I thought that it was just a really stupid move, and they're just going to get away with it because they drafted Ursary. It's such a good pick, and I think he's going to be such a good pro. So a lot of teams should make sure that they don't foolishly think this is a lesson of, oh, yeah, we can trade our star lineman, because it will not work out to the same fortune as it's probably going to work out for the Texans. They had a really fun first 2 days of the draft, and I even like Jalen Smith. I think he's an underrated slot cornerback that was pretty productive in a USC defense that really lacked the secondary play that was necessary to be a successful pass defense. But Jalen Smith was a bright spot for that team. Higgins and Knoll, I mean, you can talk all day about how productive they were for Iowa State. Overall, I think this is a really strong day two and a really strong start for a Houston team that definitely needed kind of splash playmakers and impact additions in order to take those next steps. Moving
Yes.
forward to, oh, sorry, go ahead.
You go ahead. You go ahead.
Okay, I was going to say, moving forward to day three, in the fourth round, they added Woody Marks, the running back out of USC. Then they moved on to round 6, where we saw Jalen Reed, the safety out of Penn State, and Graham Mertz, the quarterback out of Florida. And then in the seventh round, they added Keontae Hamilton, the defensive lineman out of Rutgers, and Luke Lachey, the tight end out of Iowa. Bailey, this is an interesting haul, especially starting with Marks in round 4. What were your thoughts on these picks, and does anyone stand out for you?
Yeah, who stands to me is Keontae Hamilton, defensive tackle from Rutgers. This is somebody who I thought was a ascending player for Rutgers. He started for them for a couple of years there. Has that wrestling background, and it's a tough competition at the bottom of the Texans defensive tackle room when you look at it. Maybe not at the top. They have a ton of good guys, but at the bottom, it's definitely getting competitive there. But if he can stick on the 53 man, I feel like he has the upside to eventually be a key contributor in that room that's kind of lacking those impact players when the rest of your defense is so good. It seems like that's the one glaring hole. So yeah, I really like him as a kind of ascending player looking to year 2 or year 3. How about you, Michael?
Yeah, the guy that stands out to me is Luke Lachey, and I think my bold prediction here is that he's going to be the eventual starter for the Texans at tight end once Dalton Schultz moves on, or whether that's hidden free agency or whatever. I think Lachey has a lot of great traits, and I think it's similar to Tucker Kraft, where this season he was very beaten up with injuries, and I think it's pretty evident to where he wasn't looking as shifty, as nimble on the field. But as he gets back into the NFL and gets fully healthy, we're going to see that flash of what made Lachey such an intriguing tight end prospect back in the summer when he was a lot higher in a lot of consensus ranks. He was a bright spot for an Iowa passing team that did not have a lot of production. And I think once he kind of gets involved in NFL attack that has a lot more variance, a lot more opportunities for other pass catchers to open up opportunities for him in the middle, he's going to be able to make that splash play. And I think he's going to be a very good tight end in the NFL and a great value here in the seventh round.
Absolutely. So Michael, overall are you giving this Texans draft?
Yeah, I'm giving it a B plus. I think this was a very good draft for them, and I think overall, I really like the offensive impact that they were able to accomplish with this draft. Still, some question marks for the Texans as a team. Some needs that I probably would have liked to see addressed, especially on the interior defensive line. I didn't feel like they had the depth that I necessarily wanted them to not address the defensive line until late in this draft. But overall, it's a pretty good draft, and I'm excited to see what they can do with it.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat with you. I give him a B. I love that double dip of wide receiver. I feel like that's a really cool move, and I really like how they addressed the first 2 days of this draft, and then maybe in day 3, they kind of fell off a little bit in terms of their needs. But there's some interesting pieces here and some developmental guys that I feel like could reach their upside. They could be real contributors, and maybe you want to see a better succession to Mixon than Woody Marks too. But overall, yeah, I feel good with the B draft here.
Yeah. So moving forward to their division rival, the Indianapolis Colts, they started off with Tyler Warren in the first round. In round 2, they added JT Tuimoloau, and then in round 3, they added Justin Wally, the cornerback out of Minnesota. Bailey, this is a few interesting selections that they've made with their first 3 selections in the draft. How did you assess it as a whole?
Yeah, I feel like Tyler Warren to Indy was just it's such a telegraphed pick. I mean, it's been analyzed to death, but this is something that they need. It's really encouraging to see Ballard actually address the need for once. And it's like, we really need a tight end, and they finally got one. This is their tight end of the future, and I'm really excited to see how that offense plays out. A lot of very fun pieces with a lot of talented pieces. How's that puzzle going to come together? I mean, we'll see. But when we move on to the day 2, the Colts kind of fall back into their classic traps where they don't really take players that they need and they more take players that they like. I feel like taking JTT here is just not the best value, especially when you just took Latu last year and Quiddy Pay, I think maybe might be in the last year of his deal, but I don't love this kind of idea. We're just gonna keep drafting, replace the players that we've already drafted, just extend them, extend a player, address some other needs. Like they need some O-line, they need some linebacker, and I don't know. I felt like their cornerback room was too good too, and so Justin Wally is a bit of a luxury pick in my opinion.
Yeah, I didn't hate their day 2. I thought it was pretty good. And I think they'll probably keep one of their defensive ends, but I think a lot of these guys, besides Latu, are hitting the open market this offseason with Odeingbo already gone to Chicago. So I understood the pick, and I like JT Tuimoloau. I think he's a very high IQ player that kind of fits that 4-3 base scheme that they like to run, to where I can see him making some steady impact, a long career, like consistent 6 to 10 sack guy. Maybe we'll see, but I like Warren. I do think I was convinced during our mock, the better it is to kind of get a manufactured touches, make Anthony Richardson do as little as possible, the better. And I think it makes sense for this team. They added Giddens, who can kind of be that second power back, second fiddle runner for this Indianapolis Colts team in that day 3 that we'll talk about a little bit later. But overall, I think the draft was interesting for Indianapolis. And I don't hate it at all. I think it's definitely very Ballard coded, but overall, it's not too bad.
Yeah, moving on to day three, the Colts address offensive tackle. They take Jalen Travis from Iowa State. Pick 151, they take DJ Giddens, running back from Kansas State. At pick 189, they take Riley Leonard, a bit of an interesting pick there, QB from Notre Dame. At 190, they take Tim Smith, defensive tackle from Alabama. And at 232, Hunter Wooler, linebacker from Wisconsin. Michael, a very interesting day three for the Colts. What do you think of these picks?
Yeah, I think Hunter Waller is a very instinctual safety that is very intriguing in the seventh round. He's someone that was very highly productive for Wisconsin, kind of has like linebacker size, but is able to kind of come downhill with his play IQ and processing to make an impact in the secondary. He's someone that I think could be a very sneaky depth piece in that safety room. And if Nick Cross were to walk, it wouldn't shock me if Waller's able to replace him at that strong safety position.
Yeah, I really like DJ Giddens here, the running back. I feel like the offense was okay when Taylor went down, and Taylor will just miss his games every year. But you're really looking for somebody who can maybe level off that drop off a little bit. I think Giddens is the guy there who they've been not desperately looking for, but is somebody who can add something new to that room. He's a great complement to Taylor and what they already have there. So I'm really excited for this pick and see how he can maybe contribute to that room in ways that we haven't seen the other running backs do. But overall, Michael, what are you giving this Colts draft?
Yeah, so for my grade, I put down a B. I feel like there's logic behind each pick to where you kind of get and understand where Ballard was coming from. There's definitely some questions for some of their selections. Justin Wally maybe was drafted a little bit early. I didn't love the Jalen Travis selection, even though he's probably just like a swing tackle for them. But overall, I feel like there's enough sound logic and needs being addressed to where I'm not going to hate on the draft too much. I'll give him a B.
Yeah, I give them the Seattle. It was a pretty average draft for the Colts. I mean, it's what they always do, but I do think, this has the potential to be like Tyler Warren's the crown pick of this draft, and I really think he can save this. But I would like to see O-line address a little early. But I don't think they took a linebacker. Also, they took Waller in the seventh, but I would like to see maybe a more starter capable player a little bit earlier. So I don't know, I feel like there's still a lot of holes on the Colts roster that they didn't address in this draft, but can't really hate on the players. Just the needs that they addressed.
Yeah, it was an interesting draft for them, and we'll see how it pans out in a year that probably a lot of heat on that seat for Chris Ballard. But moving forward to in division rival Jacksonville Jaguars, who made headlines right away on draft night, trading up for Travis Hunter with the second pick of the draft. And then they continued on day two with the selections of Caleb Ransall, the defensive back out of Tulane, and Wyatt Milam, the offensive lineman out of West Virginia. Bailey, you're a huge Travis Hunter fan. You talked about it earlier. What were your thoughts on this first 2 days of picks?
Yeah, I love this aggressive move. Training up to get Travis Hunter, you kick off the new regime with a bang. You get this two-way star, the Otani of football here, and Travis Hunter is going to be such a fun fit in that Jaguars offense. I think they just said they're going to play him at wide receiver mainly first, and then ease him into the cornerback. So T. Law, Brian Thomas Jr., and Travis Hunter. That's quite an exciting trio. And then I do think that again, like similar to the Falcons, I'm not sure how good this roster is. So training your first next year is very, very scary, especially when you are a new head coach and a new GM, and maybe year one doesn't go the way you plan, and suddenly year two, whoops, don't have my first, and then year three you get fired. So that hopefully they can avoid that. And then when we look at the other picks, I liked Caleb Ransall and Wyatt Millam. I'm not sure if this was the kind of the biggest needs that the Jags had though.
Yeah, they're big on positionless football. So getting a guy like Travis Hunter, I mean, just fits that to a T. And then you look at Caleb Ransall, a guy who kind of played between safety and cornerback. It makes a lot of sense. And I think he could be a guy that maybe is playing a little bit of cornerback and Travis Hunter comes on and he's still able to stay on the field. So I kind of see the pairing there, and I kind of like that. Wyatt Millen's a guy that I think is going to end up at guard for this team, but I think he has the versatility to play at either spot. He has the experience playing left tackle for West Virginia, obviously. But it all comes down to Travis Hunter, and I think he's going to be an absolute stud in the NFL. Even if the durability concerns you, they can eventually just say, okay, yeah, you just got to stick to one position, and we're going to keep you at wide receiver. And it's all about making Trevor Lawrence work if you're Liam Cohen. I mean, maybe eventually you get out of that and you have an opportunity to get your new quarterback, but more than likely, it's about can we make Trevor Lawrence a franchise quarterback, and can we make this team recover what was the momentum they were building on on early in his career. And I mean, in order to do that, you have to get an elite receiver around him. And I think getting Travis Hunter here makes a lot of sense. And it very much fits in that McVay, Les Snead ideology of, yeah, let's just make sure we get the impact players and fill out the rest later on in the draft. So moving forward to day 3, they started out with Bashal Tutin in the 4th round and Jack Kaiser, linebacker out of Notre Dame. Then in the 6th round, they added Jalen McLeod, the edge linebacker, kind of versatile guy out of Auburn, and Rayon Lane, the safety out of Navy. And then in the 7th round, they added Jonah Monheim, the tackle that turned center this year for USC, and LaQuint Allen, running back out of Syracuse. Bailey, a lot of picks here on day 3. Which one stands out to you?
I really like the 10 pick. I feel like he's an athletic freak. The Jags running back room is a bit muddled right now. Like obviously ETN is not who they kind of hoped he would be. So there are snaps available. He kind of lost his starting job, and Tedden is just such a fun player. And this is somebody that I feel like traditionally the Dolphins or the San Francisco 49ers would have taken. So it's fun to see him get to one of these running backs land on a new team where maybe they won't get buried on the depth chart and can actually carve something out for themselves.
Yeah, I think the one who stands out to me is Jalen McLeod because, you kind of consider Jalen Walker, who is this like premier linebacker edge kind of hybrid guy that was able to be taken in the 1st round. I think the value was there. McLeod kind of played in a similar role for Auburn. He wasn't necessarily the same type of impact, but he also wasn't dealing with the same supporting cast surrounding him. I think this is a guy who really kind of proved himself over the season and really established himself in his first year as a starter. It wouldn't shock me if this is someone that the league severely overlooked and he's able to make an impact for a Jaguars team that is praising and heavily searching for versatility in their defense.
Absolutely. So, Michael, what do you think of this Jags draft all in all?
Yeah, so I gave it a B minus. I think honestly, I appreciate not sitting on your hands, especially in year 1. It'd be very easy for them to do so. Sit at 5 and just see what happens. But the fact that they were aggressive in their mentality, I really respect it. So I'll bump it up to a B. I give it a B, and I really think that pick of Travis Hunter is such a surefire home run that I like it as a first step in their process.
Yeah, I originally had it at C. I probably bumped this up to a C plus. Like I love that trade up for Hunter. The rest of the draft didn't blow me away, but they did get solid players. But I would like to see defensive line address, maybe offensive tackle address. But it's an okay draft. It rides on Hunter. This draft will live and die by Hunter. The rest of the picks I don't want to call them relevant, but they're all kind of tertiary pieces to the primary of Hunter.
It's going to be very interesting to see how this draft ages because there's so much versatility, so much positionless football almost. So if it hits, I mean, a lot of people are going to mimic the ideology, try to get that versatility in their drafts. If it doesn't, I mean, it could really blow up in the Jaguars' defensive face. And now we have the Kansas City Chiefs with the 32nd pick. They took Joshua Simmons, a tackle that really we've talked about and raved about all cycle, where this was extreme upside. And then with their other picks on day 2, they grabbed Omar Norman Lott, Ashton Gelati, the edge rusher out of Louisville, and Noel Williams, the defensive back out of California. Bailey, what were your thoughts on their selections in the first 2 days?
I mean, I feel like the highlight here is their first round selection of Josh Simmons, someone who we were both, I feel, extremely high on. His pass protection is probably the best out of all the offensive tackles in the class. The only thing that holding him back, of course, was that injury, the knee. It was unclear how much that would impact him in the future, but the Chiefs have never been one to shy away from injury concerns or character concerns or anything else. They just trust the tape, and I think with Simmons, this is probably the best value out of the first round. Getting somebody like him at pick 32 is huge for them, and is somebody who, if they want, could be an instant starter for them.
Yeah, what the Chiefs do best is acknowledge their needs, and they don't have an ego about it. They just go back into the market and they look to improve on it. I didn't necessarily love letting Joe Thuney walk this offseason, but they were able to retain Trey Smith, and now they're getting Josh Simmons at left tackle. It wouldn't surprise me if this offensive line is able to really kind of take that next step forward thanks to the upside of a pick like this and that impact of a left tackle like Simmons. With their other picks, Norman Lott is a very explosive pass rusher that they can have on the interior. Ashton Gelati really had a really strong season. He just didn't necessarily have the same sack total, wasn't necessarily as flashy of an athlete, but a very good player. And Noel Williams, I mean, he's a very dependable, impressive cornerback in a secondary that he was kind of the headliner for that was very underrated this year in college football.
Yeah, I think Norman Law is the most interesting pick here. This is somebody who you're taking around 2. He didn't really start for Tennessee last season. He was kind of rotating out. He saw his snaps decrease. So when you look at their depth chart and who's starting next to Chris Jones is not really anybody of note. So ideally here, I feel like you would want to get a starter. And I'm not sure if Norman Lott is capable of giving you starter snaps right away, which is the only kind of, slight I have against their days 1 and 2. Ashton Delottie, like you said, really good edge rusher. Noel Williams, really, really impressive production out of that corner from Cal. It's somebody that, Spags loves to do, those high production guys. And, like their cornerback room has been thinning out in recent years, and they've had to rely on some players who have been a little bit more below average. So getting someone like Noel Williams here, who has that ability to shadow a receiver or even just stick him on a wide receiver too, is somebody I think is great value here at 85.
Yeah, now moving forward to day 3, they only had 3 selections, but they started it off strong with Jalen Royals in the 4th round, Jeff Bossa in the 5th round, and then Rashard Smith, running back out of SMU, in the 7th round. Bailey, this is a very intriguing haul. Who do you want to highlight here?
I mean, you're gonna highlight any of these guys. I feel like they're all gonna be pretty big contributors for them. For the person I want to highlight the most probably is Jalen Royal, somebody who, in the draft process, his range was a little bit of a question mark just because he was playing at a smaller school. Again, he did have that injury that cut his final year short, similar to Josh Simmons actually. But what he showed on tape and in the testing was very impressive. And he's such a versatile player. The Chiefs, I feel like their biggest weakness is they don't have that guy who can kind of just give them everything. And Royals is that guy you can kind of line up where in any role and ask him to do anything, and he can do that. Somebody that they desperately need in that wide receiver room.
Yeah, it wouldn't shock me if the Chiefs are able to roll with Rashee Rice, Xavier Worthy, and Jalen Royals as their long-term starting 3 at the wide receiver position. Very good grab. I really like Rashard Smith. I think you kind of needed that explosive and playmaking ability out of the backfield. Kareem Hunt is a nice grinder. Isaiah Pacheco kind of fell off a little bit after the injury, maybe back fully healthy. He can still be a pretty productive runner, but you need someone that can kind of vary it up and provide some splash playability in that backfield. And I think Rashard Smith has that both speed-wise, playmaking-wise, and just receiving profile. There's a lot to like with his skill set, and I think the Chiefs just got an absolute steal here that a lot of teams are going to regret.
Yeah,
Moving
absolutely.
forward, oh, sorry.
Sorry, just
Moving
go ahead.
forward
I
to
wanted to know your
our draft
grade.
grades. Yeah, I
Sorry.
was going to say, moving forward to our draft grades, it's for me, it's an A. I think you can't really question too much about this draft. I mean, there's maybe the question of fit with Omar Norman Lott in a defensive line with Chris Jones, stuff like that. Very small nitpicks that you can kind of have concerns about for what they'll do in the future. But I think they really just nailed this draft and hit a huge home run with their overall selection. So I really like it.
Yeah, I disagree with you, but I give it an A plus. I feel like this was a really solid draft for them. They got a lot of positions of needs while grabbing a lot of talented players. Just to echo everything you said, we didn't even mention Jeffrey Bossa, who could also contribute to a linebacker room. So yeah, a very, very solid draft through and through.
Yeah, very hard to not come away impressed with this class. Moving forward to their division rival, Los Angeles Chargers. They started out the first round with Amarion Hampton and followed it up with Trey Harris and Jamari Caldwell in their 2nd and 3rd round picks on day 2. Bailey, this is an intriguing start for this Chargers team. Very offensive focus with their first 2 picks. What do you think of the overall mindset?
Yeah, this was a bit of an identity draft for the Chargers, right? They got Marion Hampton and Trey Harris and Jamari Caldwell in the first, 3 picks. Very physical players. This is the kind of brand of football that Harbaugh played at Michigan. This is clearly the style that he wants to transfer over to the pros, and you got some real grinders here, some real physical guys. So I love this draft. They needed a running back. They had Najee Harris on the 1-year deal. Who knows what he's going to do after that? And maybe he's better suited in the backup role. So you grab Hampton, who is going to be a long-term starter for them at running back. Trey Harris is somebody, obviously, they need an outside receiver. I feel like the options they have there aren't that great. And Jamari Caldwell is a very solid defensive tackle up the middle.
Yeah, I think Trey Harris probably would have been wide receiver 1 for me, honestly. Just pure receiving ability, I think he has so much upside, and I'm really excited to see what he can do with Justin Herbert, especially in an offense that already has Ladd McConkey playing across from him. I think Harris is going to be an absolute steal in this class and just an absolute star for the Chargers organization. I like Caldwell. I think he's a good run stuffer, kind of fits that mentor kind of scheme where he can really kind of play that Poona Ford role and do pretty well. Marion Hampton's a good back. He's going to be solid, productive. I don't necessarily love matching him with Najee Harris, but I think you take Hampton, you kind of move on from Harris after a year, and you're more than okay with it. Moving forward to their day 3 selections, though, they had 6, and they started out with Kyle Kennard in the 4th round, Keandre Lambert-Smith and Aronde Gadsden in the 5th. 6th round, they added Branson Taylor, the offensive lineman out of Pitt, R.J. Mickens, the safety out of Clemson, and Triqueze Bridges, the defensive back out of Florida. Do you have one pick in this group that kind of stands out to you?
Yeah, to me, I feel like the most intriguing guy here is Gadsden. This is somebody who was a little bit of I don't want to say a faller, but somebody who I felt like could contribute more and probably should have got maybe a round or two higher. When you look at what the Chargers like to do out of their t tight ends and how they're utilizing them, there's a lot of tight window physical stuff, and I feel like that's what Gadsden, sorry, excels in that role. And with Will Dissly, I'm not even sure if he's still on the roster. Honestly, I didn't check, but with him, kind of not being that great, I think Gadsden's somebody who has the upside where you can develop him into being a full-time tight end while still integrating him into your offense and using him in the role that you kind of have in the past.
Yeah, he started out as a receiver and he moved over to tight end and has put on weight pretty well. He's at 240 pounds. Really nice catch radius, really nice athleticism, still has a lot of great receiving traits. I think he's going to be someone that is a star for this Chargers offense. I think he could really kind of work himself up into the system. The only question is Greg Roman kind of sticks to his guys, so it wouldn't shock me if Dissly kind of sticks around as a starting tight end and they feature him a lot. But Gadsden, if he gets the opportunity, I think he can prove himself productive and really be a favorite target for Herbert, who likes to get the tight ends involved. It wouldn't shock me if he's similar to kind of Stone Smart last year in terms of what he produces in his first year as a rookie. So looking at grade, what did you give this Chargers haul overall?
I gave this draft a B plus. Like I said before, this is an identity draft for the Chargers. They had a lot of interesting pieces here. Kyle Kennard obviously dominant in the SEC last year, and when you look at their 53-man roster, it's actually kind of filling up. They've been doing a good job in the past, kind of filling out the bottom of the roster. I mean, 6 picks here in day three, they're going to have maybe one of the deepest rosters in the league, 1 to 53, going into next year.
Yeah, I think it's a really nice haul, and I feel like they did a good job of just adding some nice depth, especially with their later picks, where these guys maybe aren't going to be absolute stars for their team, but they can still stick around on this roster, contribute in certain ways, and that brings a lot of value. I gave it a B plus as well. I think it was a pretty nice grab of just good talent in this class, and I really am looking forward to seeing some of these dart throws like Mickens and Gadsden to see what they can become for this roster. So going forward now to the other Los Angeles team, and that is the Los Angeles Rams. They trade out of the first round with a very nice trade back where they get the Falcons future first. And then in the second round, they had Terrence Ferguson, and they followed up with a third-round selection of Josiah Stewart, the edge rusher out of Michigan. Bailey, what do you think of the trade back, and what do you think of their other selections with it?
So obviously last year, they traded their future second trip for Braden Fisk, which they're pretty happy with. And so in this draft, I kind of like the decision to trade back out of the first. They got pick 46 in the future first from the Falcons. I'm not sure about the Terrence Ferguson selection. This seems like they kind of went in with like we're just gonna come away with a tight end. Whoever's like the top 10 on our board, we're just going to take him. And Terrence Ferguson is a very intriguing prospect. Is he worthy of a top 50 pick? I'm not that certain of that. And Josiah Stewart is somebody who's obviously like a pass rushing menace, but again, you have two top 100 selections. You take one tight end, that's fine. Take another one, an edge rusher. I don't think edge is the biggest need on your roster right now. You don't really need more pass rush. You kind of need some other positions that I would like to see here. So yeah, a very I'm not sure if I can get behind this drafting ideology from the Rams here.
Yeah, I was a little lower on Ferguson as well, so it kind of didn't sit right with me with this selection. I felt like there were better options available on the board, especially later in the draft. I mean, there were guys that I really liked that went way later that, I understand that it's a difference in evaluation, and maybe that just means I was off, but, I got to stick to my gut here. I can't be influenced by just the draft order and pecking order that these guys came off the board. But I think Ferguson's going to find ways to contribute. He was pretty productive and dependable for Oregon, even when they had a lot of pass catchers in their offense with Tez Johnson, Evan Stewart, Trayshawn Holden, that were all very productive receivers. So he was kind of that fourth option, and maybe that kind of hurt his overall production profile, and he would have been more impressive if he got more feature in the offense. But the athleticism's there, the excitement's there, and it's hard to really go against McVay when he's picking his guys. So I understand the selection. And Josiah Stewart, kind of just on brand for what the Rams do. They love to take those athletes that maybe disappointed a little bit with their testing. He especially ran like a 4.85 as an undersized edge rusher, but I mean, the Rams saw the tape. They said, hey, that's all right with us. We will take the in-game athleticism, on-field athleticism, and let them shine. I bet it'll work out pretty well. So moving forward to their day three selections, in the fourth round, they added Jarquez Hunter. In the fifth round, they added Ty Hamilton, the defensive lineman out of Ohio State. Later on in the fifth, they added Chris Paul Jr., the linebacker out of Ole Miss. And in the seventh round, they added Kanata Mumfield, wide receiver out of Pittsburgh. Bailey, just four selections, but what were your thoughts on this draft on day three?
Yeah, this was an interesting draft, especially Jarquez Hunter. Like we said, they have some clear needs, and I'm not sure running back was one of them. So I that was an interesting pick, I thought. But I thought the best pick or most intriguing pick here to me was Ty Hamilton, defensive tackle from Ohio State. Not somebody you really think of as a traditional run stuffer, but when you turn on the tape, he does certainly hold his gap well, and he has the upside to help in the pass rush. But the biggest issue I think for the Rams last year was their run defense. Is Ty Hamilton someone you can rotate in, and he does add a little bit to that run stuffing ability of the Rams defense. And maybe you want to see them draft somebody who had maybe was a bit more stout against the run, but Hamilton has the pass rush upside and run defense where you don't have to sacrifice one for the other. So I really like this pick, and he should be a key member of the rotation year one.
Yeah, the guy I want to talk about is Chris Paul, the linebacker. 6'1", 222, but he's really physical. And despite being undersized, he finds ways to make plays in that front seven. And he has decent athleticism as well, to where I think he kind of is an upgrade for a Rams team that's been so reliant on these old school traditional linebackers that are like running pretty slow and then they struggle to kind of match on the outside. They added Chris Paul and they also added Sean Dolick in the undrafted free agency cycle. So I'm intrigued to see what these rookie linebackers can do and if they can step in and make an immediate impact for the team. So looking at grades for the Los Angeles Rams, what were your thoughts on the Rams draft as a whole?
It's always hard to give the Rams a bad draft because in 3 years you're just going to look like an idiot when all these guys are good starters. But judging based on my evaluation and based on my, what I see their roster as, I think this one ID. This is not really a draft a team Super Bowl aspirations should be doing. This is a rebuilding team who swung and missed. That's what they should be doing. Maybe take some more upside players. You get your future first, but how many years left do you have of Stafford? And I don't think this draft makes them a tangibly better team than they were last year. And you kind of need to make some more all-in decisions, I think, to maximize the window that you have, like they did when they won their Super Bowl last time.
Yeah, I think this draft kind of lacks impact as well. So I gave it a D. I did like the trade back, but it's hard to kind of evaluate in the grade with that. So I gave it a D. Maybe I could be convinced to D plus, C minus if we're considering the trade in the future, and I get to consider that more. But with the picks that they made themselves in this class, I was a little underwhelmed. So going forward to the Las Vegas Raiders, a team that had countless picks in this draft, and they started off with Ashton Genty, the running back out of Boise State, with the sixth overall pick. In the second round, they followed it up with Jack Besh. And in the third round, they added three different guys: Darian Porter, cornerback out of Iowa State; Caleb Rogers, offensive lineman out of Texas Tech; and Charles Grant, offensive lineman out of William and Mary. Bailey, busy team on draft night. What were your thoughts on the Raiders?
Yeah, I just want to go over the Genty pick real quick. Obviously, something that they were heavily signaling for. This is something that was heavily mocked to, and the beat writers were like, "No, they're not going to do it," and the front office was kind of being cagey about it. But I feel like this is a slam dunk pick for them. Pick for them. You get Geno, you got your running back, you got your tight end, and Jacoby Myers is like a solid wide receiver. So that's going to be a really fun offense. And they add to that wide receiver room with Jack Bash, somebody who has great ball skills. I do wonder how they're going to deploy him. I wish I watched the press conference to see more what ideas they had for him because it seems like he might be clashing with Bowers a little bit, but should be fun as a slot player. And then Darian Porter is someone who I think adds to that cornerback room where they've lost, I think, two of their starters from last year. So you definitely need some talent in there, and then some O-line depth picks. The O-line's fine, but I definitely think that long term, I don't know how many of these are exactly long-term starters that you want starting for your team for the next 5-10 years. So I like the idea behind there to double dip.
Yeah, I got duped as well with Genty just because when Pete Carroll was at Seattle, he would like draft these, he would make these draft hints, and it would be the most obscure things ever. So when he's like talking in the press conference, like, "Oh, be careful when you mention Genty," ho ho ho, like it just felt like a smoke screen. But they took him, and I think it's going to pay off. I like Jack Besh as this power slot for them. I do think Myers is someone that's kind of best working between slot and outside. But if they're able to rotate both guys, that's perfectly fine. Darian Porter's a nice swing and kind of fits into that Pete Carroll cornerback mold. Obviously, Carroll's not the defensive guy, but it still just falls right in line with what they've kind of built up. And I expect him to work out for a cornerback room that desperately needs that talent. I like the upside swing. And the offensive lineman I like. Rogers is a nice pulling tackle that probably kicks inside in the NFL, but still is very exciting, very experienced, and has some potential to play both at center, at guard, and maybe tackling an absolute dire pinch because of his experience. But I think he'll be a nice interior lineman. Then Charles Grant, they talked about wanting him to stay on the offensive tackle spot. It wouldn't shock me if he's someone that really kind of outperforms the expectation in draft slot just because he's a small school guy, but he has a lot of great traits. Moving forward to the day 3 selections, Dante Thornton Jr. in the 4th round, wide receiver out of Tennessee. Then they continued that up with another 4th round pick of Tonka Hemingway, defensive lineman out of South Carolina. In the 6th round, they had 3 selections, J.J. Pegues, defensive lineman out of Ole Miss, then 2 FCS quarterbacks, Tommy Mellott, the Montana State athlete, will probably have to say more than quarterback, and then Cam Miller, quarterback out of North Dakota State, sorry. And then they finished it all out with a 7th round pick of Cody Lindenberg, the big old school linebacker from Minnesota. Bailey, busy day 3 as well. What do you think of these selections?
Yeah, there's a lot of crazy picks here. I feel like you can talk about any of them at length, and it'll probably fill out like an hour of content. But I want to focus on JJ Pegues here, someone who is a defensive tackle. I feel like in the interior you got Christian Wilkins, but besides that, not a lot of contributors or people that you feel confident starting every down snaps. And Pegues is somebody who you can kind of rely on to line him up in different alignments, different looks. Line him up from anywhere from 3 tech to 7 tech. I feel like he's fine, and even somebody who can help you out in the run game. A little bit of a bowling ball in the run game, get you those short yardage conversions that you need. So yeah, very fun pick there, and I'm excited to see how they integrate him into the defense and potentially offense.
Yeah, very good fullback. Don't dismiss it. But the guy I want to talk about is Tommy Mellott, a QB convert who's probably going to go to wide receiver in the NFL. He's a great athlete, and he's someone that was very productive as a mobile quarterback for Montana State. Had some solid passing. I'm not trying to just discredit his ability as a quarterback, but he's been open to being wide receiver in the NFL, and I think that's where he projects best. He has just everything you could ask for in terms of athleticism, and I believe that if he was playing wide receiver this year, he'd probably be taken in that 3rd, 4th round range. And with the athleticism alone, there's plenty of intrigue, plenty of excitement about him. I think Las Vegas, who's kind of has a kooky coach with Pete Carroll, willing to be a little off the radar, outside of the box with their play calling. I think we're going to see some very fun looks for Tommy Mellott, and I think he's going to be a very good pro. So when you look at the draft grades for the Las Vegas Raiders, where are you putting them?
I put him at B plus. I think this is the craziest draft out of anybody for any team. So this could easily backfire on them when you kind of take players who are more like intriguing and fun than technically sound. But I feel like there's a very solid foundation behind these. A lot of the guys that are taking who do have the upside do have kind of have that floor and have that ability to contribute, even if they don't reach their full potential. So it was a good mix of that, and so I really like this first draft from the Pete Carroll era for them. So yeah, B plus.
I gave it a B plus as well, but I do think that this is a draft that probably ages better when we look back in hindsight, just because there's so many teams that are going to be coming out of these drafts, and they're going to look back and they're going to say, we didn't really get any contributors. We only got 1 or 2 guys. It wouldn't shock me if this draft is one that has more of the 2, 3, maybe 4 contributors in this class, and that's going to be huge when looking back on it in hindsight. So I really like the haul, and I think there's a lot of intriguing upside prospects in this class, so I give it a B plus. Going forward now, we have the Miami Dolphins, a team that entered into draft day with plenty of question marks about what this team was going to be able to do to fix up a roster that was consistently losing talent in the free agency cycle, just too much money tied into their stars. They started out with Kenneth Grant in the 1st round, then Jonah Savati-Naya in the 2nd. They didn't have any other picks on day 1 and 2. So, Bailey, 2 picks, 2 grades. What are your thoughts on these guys?
Kenneth Grant, obviously a very talented nose tackle from Michigan, and somebody that the Dolphins very desperately need. They did really need that nose tackle. I do question the value at 13, not necessarily about Grant the player, who probably, like, from a pure talent standpoint, is deserving to go in this range, but is this really what the Dolphins need the most? Probably not. When you look at the roster, like we've been saying before, this is kind of more of a long-term building piece. I feel like for them, and not somebody who, when you look at the roster, is kind of like in desperation mode. This is like the beginning of a rebuild almost with this pick, where you're just like, we're just going to take good players that we know are going to be good, and who cares about not the next year, but we know that this is going to be a very solid building block for us. And same with Savati-Naya, somebody who is not really a scheme fit, not somebody the Dolphins traditionally go after, with kind of his limited skill set. So very, very interesting draft, very anti-Dolphins day 1 and day 2 for them.
Yeah, I love Kenneth Grant, and I think that he'll be a good player for this team. similar to the Derek Browns and the Dexter Lawrences, where I think the impact is good enough to where it warrants that first round selection. I agree, though, that the Dolphins probably had more dire needs, especially when they did a really nice job of creating defensive line like production last year, despite maybe having like a low resource type of group. So it was very intriguing that they decided to still opt to go in that position and continue to do so on day three as well. But we'll talk about that later. I like Savati. His tackle tape is really, really bad, but I do think he's a really good guard. And I think once he kicks inside for this team, he's going to be able to find a home on that offensive line, probably at left guard, and really produce in that role. So I like the picks in terms of just the players. But I don't know. I feel like the Dolphins needed bigger splashes with their picks if they were going to kind of recover from what was a disappointing season. And I don't know if they did. Moving forward to their day three selections, they had 3 fifth-round picks, and they took Jordan Phillips, defensive lineman out of Maryland, Jason Marshall, cornerback out of Florida, and Dante Trader Jr., the safety out of Maryland. Then they followed it up with a 6th-round pick of Ollie Gordon II, a 7th-round selection of Quinn Ewers, quarterback out of Texas, and a 7th-round selection of Zeke Biggers, the defensive lineman out of Georgia Tech. Bailey, a busy day 3, but one that you have some thoughts on. I'd love to hear them.
Yeah, Zeke Biggers is pretty apt description of their draft. They're drafting a lot of big guys here, and Ollie Gordon obviously is somebody who I feel like a lot of people were maybe higher on last year, had a disappointing year at Oklahoma State, and adds a lot to that Dolphins the backfield. Is traditionally these guys who come from the San Francisco tree just refuse to draft or even sign or start bigger running backs who can really help you out in this short yard situation. So like I said, this is a very anti-Dolphins draft. I can't actually believe what I was seeing in day 3 from them. The very, very like out of left field, I feel like, but not in a good way. Also, I feel like they should have. Where's the offensive tackle picks? Where's the early corner? And like this draft, like they did, eventually get a corner. But if you're going to take someone like Savatinaya at 37, who in a scheme where your guard doesn't really matter and he's not even like that important, that big of a scheme fit, just trade back from the pick. If you're at 37, just trade back, pick up day 3, address some more needs. This is just a complete reset for the Dolphins, and I gotta say I'm not really a big fan of it.
Yeah, I love the Ollie Gordon pick. I feel like watching Devon Achane, it was pretty clear that they needed that guy that can kind of convert in short yardage, and I think Gordon can be that while still having some other value as well as a run ball carrier and just maybe can unlock some of the juice that he had in that 2023 campaign by dropping a little bit of weight. But I think he's going to be a nice pairing with Achane to where that backfield is going to be very exciting. Maybe Jalen Wright still gets involved in some degree, but it's those two guys that I'm really hoping kind of be the main pairing. But yeah, I didn't love the way that they addressed the defensive line because it felt like they just grabbed 3 guys who are probably best in that one tech nose tackle type of role. And I don't know, it seems very weird. I know Zach Sieler is a very talented defensive tackle. Maybe you're just saying, okay, we need these 3 guys to produce against the run. We'll have Sieler next to him, and we're going to have Jalen Phillips, Bradley Chubb, Chop Robinson all rotating, and you're working a 4-down lineman consistently. Maybe then I can kind of buy into it more, but I feel like they're trying to run that kind of base 3-4 with 3 defensive linemen on the field. And with that, I don't really get the mindset here. If Jordan Phillips is dropping some weight, maybe then I could get it. But I don't know. There's a lot of question marks here. I do like Quinn Ewers because I think he can kind of heal up. But I don't know. I don't love the selections here that they made. And it's just a weird draft for the Dolphins. I gave it a C+. I definitely had a little bit more of an optimistic mindset just because I do like the picks on day 1 and 2 with Sabati and Kenneth Grant. I think they're very high-end contributors. I think Ollie Gordon can be a productive piece in that backfield, but I feel like it's missing a little bit of flavor, missing a little bit of juice that you needed for this Dolphins team that is desperately trying to climb themselves back up into the standings after a disappointing campaign.
Yeah, I give them an F. I think this is a disaster draft for the Dolphins. Anytime you take 3 nose tackles, you get an automatic F. That's going to be a new role going forward. And coming out of this draft, when your only stars are a nose tackle and a guard with the roster they have, Tyreek Hill, who knows how long he's going to be there. Jalen Ramsey demanded a trade, maybe rescinded it, so he's going to be on the roster. But obviously, he's not there for long. This is a disaster draft for the Dolphins, and this is probably a regime firing draft. I don't think this regime is going to get another year to kind of fix the mistakes they made. So, yeah, this is enough. Everybody's going to get fired for this one, I feel like.
I do think that this is probably the last draft for this regime, and we'll see some new faces in Miami next offseason. But A place that probably has some stability in their front office. The Minnesota Vikings are looking to enter the J.J. McCarthy era, and they started out with a first-round pick of Donovan Jackson, offensive guard out of Ohio State. And then to follow it up on day two, they took their third-round selection and spent it on Ty Felton, the wide receiver out of Maryland. Bailey, just two selections, but what were your thoughts on the Minnesota Vikings day two haul?
Yeah, the Vikings come in with only 4 draft picks. Do a trade back later in the draft to pick up another one, and do a pick swap to get Sam Howell, which we'll talk about later. But yeah, Donovan Jackson, I I didn't see them going this pick honestly, but I really really like it. I really like Donovan Jackson as a piece in that O line. You kind of plug your one weakness in that offensive line with Donovan Jackson, and that O line's looking pretty good. The only time that Sam Darnold, the Vikings offense at all stalled last year was when they were getting pressure at the quarterback, and a lot of that was through the interior. So when you want to make JJ McCarthy's life as easy as possible, you plug that hole. And I really like Donovan Jackson. And then Ty Felton was somebody who I think might have been a little bit of a luxury pick. And when you only have like 4 picks, I feel like you can't be doing stuff like this. We were like, oh, we upgraded our wide receiver three, maybe. And so I felt like it was a bit of a luxury on a roster who maybe you wanted to see some defensive picks in the top 100. But yeah, interesting first 2 days, Michael.
Yeah, I really wish they would have gone cornerback just because I feel like they addressed the position last offseason and they had a lot of shortcomings in terms of just like fortune and luck at that position. It just decimated the position. So it was tough that they didn't go back into that position at all in this draft. But I really love Donovan Jackson, probably my highest graded offensive lineman in this class, a guy that I think is going to be an absolute stud at left guard, playing next to what is already a pretty good offensive line with some of the other pieces on that group. So I think they are really going to make that offensive line a huge identity of their team, and it's going to be a big payoff. I agree with you on Felton. I didn't think they necessarily needed another receiver. I felt like they could have used that third-round pick at cornerback, at a different position, whatever. But overall, I feel like the talent for the position and players that they took was perfectly fine. So I can sign off on it. Moving forward to their day three selections in the fifth round, they added Tyrion Ingram Dawkins, the defensive lineman and edge out of Georgia. And then with their sixth round selections, they took Kobe King, linebacker out of Penn State, and Gavin Bartholomew, tight end out of Pittsburgh. Bailey, do any of these picks stand out to you much?
Yeah, Tyrion Ingram Dawkins is what I think is the most intriguing one here. Of a kind of an ill-defined role for this guy. Kind of, I don't want to call him a tweener, but I feel like he struggles with his skill set to find a more like an every down position for him. So he's somebody who's probably gonna be using a rotation, somebody who's probably gonna be lined up in an interesting way. And I don't trust probably any defensive coordinator more than I trust Brian Flores to kind of unlock this guy and get him to become a contributor to that defensive line, which does need some help out there. And so I feel like this is not necessarily a steal of a pick, but someone who I think has a lot of upside and fits that Flores scheme really well.
Yeah, I am probably going to talk about Kobe King because I feel like his issues in the draft process were just the fact that he's this old school linebacker. You can't really trust him in coverage. He's not the greatest athlete. Flores loves that. He loves the guys that are kind of playing the shallow zone and just wants to get into contact and make some big plays. If you're looking at Kobe King in more of a Landon Roberts type of role, I think he can contribute. So I think that this is a great landing spot for him, and he can kind of excel in that role and be a big part of this defense, especially in the second level that can use some additional support. So moving forward to our draft grades, what did you give this Vikings class?
I guess a C plus. I like this draft for the Vikings, and if C's average, C plus, a little bit above average. I do like the Donovan Jackson pick and the Ty Felton pick. Like we said, I'm not 100% sold on it. So when you only have that many picks, you kind of have to be more nitpicky. I feel like if they had maybe traded back with that third round, picked up a couple fourths and fourth or a fifth or something like that, I would have been a little more confident if they filled out their depth. But all in all, I feel like this is a solid draft. You come away with a starter, and I guess that's all you can really ask for.
Yeah, they had a stud first pick, in my opinion. I love Donovan Jackson. Think he's going to be a star for this Vikings team. The rest of the picks, I don't see a lot of impact coming out from them, but I think there's potential there. I gave it a C plus as well. I wasn't super moved, but I like the first pick enough to where I'm going to sign off on it, especially when they traded some of the value that they had in this class for last year's draft. So I don't hate it. Moving forward now to the New England Patriots, the future Super Bowl champions, the absolute darling of this draft. They kick it off with Will Campbell with their first round selection, and then they finish off day two with selections of Travion Henderson, running back from Ohio State, Kyle Williams, wide receiver from Washington State, and Jared Wilson, center from Georgia. Bailey, this was a team that definitely needed some reinforcements to the draft. How do you think they did?
Yeah, all offense day 1 and 2, and I dig it. I like this. You're setting up Drake May for a great year 2. What you want to avoid with these QBs is them regressing from their year 1. And Drake May, I feel like, did very well year 1, given what he was given. But if you give him that again, you may not see another jump for him. So what you do is you go out and you draft probably 4 starters for the offense, and 4 out of 11 starters from their day 1 and day 2 is very, very solid. Will Campbell, obviously somebody who is going to have question marks throughout the entire training camp and preseason. Is he going to stick a tackle? Maybe he's taking a guard. I feel like they'll try him out at tackle. Trayvon Henderson gives the Patriots a 3-down back that I feel like they've been looking for. Ramondre Stevenson has taken a step back in the last couple of years, and Cal Williams is addition to a suddenly very crowded wide receiver room for the Patriots. A lot of talent there. Some talented players might get cut, like Javon Baker might just no longer be on the roster anymore, which is pretty crazy to even think about a couple months ago. And then Jared Wilson's somebody who a lot of people were high on as the potential center 1 in this draft, and somebody who can compete for that spot with Cole Strange and Gary Barberry for the Patriots.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what Wilson can do in that center battle. There seems to be like 8 guys that are going for it, so we'll see. They're probably just going to go with their best 5, and I assume that'll be Campbell at left tackle, at least for this first year, see what he can do. But whether Campbell's a starting guard or a tackle, I think it's good to bolster the offensive line, and they did that with the first pick. I wasn't as high on him at the tackle position, obviously, but overall it's more about addressing and bolstering that protection scheme to get Drake May successful. And if they felt Campbell was that level of player, then I totally understand it. Travion Henderson, I think, is going to be the feature back for this offense, but I do think Stevenson still has a role. Both guys can succeed together and coexist, and I think Henderson can be that playmaker that adds to this offense that definitely needs the playmaking ability. Hunter Henry's solid. Stephon Diggs is going to be coming in probably like week 4, week 6 after a little bit of injury time, but you really need that star, that young building block, and I think Henderson can be that for this team. And I like Williams. He's an exciting, polished player. I don't know if he's going to start right away. There's Booty, there's Douglas, there's Diggs, there's Hollins. Like, he's going to be competing in a crowded room, but I like adding talent and letting the strongest survive. Moving forward to their day 3 selections, they traded up and added defensive lineman Joshua Farmer out of Florida State. Then they continued on with their draft in the 5th round. Edge rusher Braden Swinson out of LSU. In the 6th round, they added Andres Borealis, kicker out of Miami, Florida. And then in the 7th round, they had 3 different picks. Marcus Bryant, offensive tackle out of Missouri. Julian Ashby, the long snapper out of Vanderbilt. And Kobe Minor, the defensive back out of Memphis. Bailey, a lot of picks on day 3. What were your thoughts on them?
Yeah, so many picks. He missed one. He missed Craig Woodson, the safety from Cal that they took at pick
I
106
did.
in the 4th round.
Apologies.
Yeah, there's a lot of picks you can highlight here. Very interesting they go kicker and long snapper here. But I want to talk about probably Joshua Farmer the most. This was somebody who I thought was a top 100 player, someone who should have gone on day 1 or day 2 when the Patriots defensive room, especially the defensive tackles, are interesting. You have Milton Williams, who they just brought in on a huge contract, and Christian Barmore, who you're kind of uncertain on the future on. And when you look at the rest of the depth on that defensive line, it's pretty thin. And Joshua Farmer is somebody who I feel like is the defensive tackle 3 in that rotation, maybe defensive tackle 4, somebody you can rotate in. Even Barmore continues, maybe unfortunately his injuries continue. He's somebody who can even start. I wouldn't be surprised if he's a starter by the end of the year. So I thought this was a steal of the pick, especially in the 4th rounds. And as much as it annoys me to say this, I think the Patriots nailed day 3.
Yeah, it was a very exciting day 3 for them. They maybe went a little bit too many special teams for some people, but we're going to talk about one of them. Andres Borealis, a big kicker. You may know Jose Borealis, who was a kicker in the draft process a few years back. This is his little brother, and he was extremely productive for Miami. Had kicks that were over 50 yards consistently and was a very flashy kicker. Look, the Patriots have been struggling at the position. They were dealing with just John Parker Romo as their kicker this year that's on their roster. Sly gone, obviously. So they need that impact. And I know a lot of people will overlook kickers. They'll dismiss these rookie guys that are stepping up to be the field goal makers. But, hey, if you can get production out of that position in the draft, that is absolutely huge. And I'm looking forward to what Andres Borealis can be for the Patriots team. So looking at the overall draft grades, Bailey, what do you give this Patriots draft?
Hurts me to say this, but I have to give it an A. I feel like the Patriots came in and executed their vision perfectly. They wanted to come in and revamp that offense, and then they did on days 1 and day 2. And then day 3, they immediately attacked the holes they have on their defense, and they did so really well. And they looked at their specialists and say, hey, we need some new guys there too. So they did. So this is going to be a draft where a lot of these guys are going to see some run from day 1, and then in the future, this is gonna be like one of those drafts you might look back on as like the Patriots 2025 draft. Look at all the stars they got from it. Very, very impressive draft.
Yeah, I gave it an A minus, and I think the big thing that knocks it down a little bit is just I wasn't as high on Campbell. So if they miss on that pick or it ends up Campbell plays guard, then there's some question marks there in terms of just like was it the best draft that they could have had? Still, very good draft, very good ideology, and I'm really looking forward to what this Vrabel and front office duo can do going forward because this was a very good start. Moving forward now to the New Orleans Saints, and they started off their draft with Kelvin Banks, the offensive tackle out of Texas, and they finished out day two with Tyler Shuck, quarterback out of Louisville, Vernon Broughton, defensive lineman out of Texas, and Jonas Sanker, the safety out of Virginia. Four selections, some decent players, some intriguing storylines to follow up with some of them. What were your thoughts on these selections?
Yeah, this was definitely an interesting kind of draft for the Saints, who came in. Obviously, Derek Carr, who knows if he's going to be healthy again. Probably a huge question mark at that QB room. When Carr went down, the options they had last year did not perform at all to the level that you expect out of them. So he definitely needed to come out of this draft with a starter. A lot of people had pick nine pegged for a QB, whether that be Sanders or Dart, but they decided to pass on and take Calvin Banks, take another offensive tackle, kind of have to rebuild that room again after the pick of Trevor Penning didn't work out. Maybe you keep Penning inside. So that was a very interesting pick. And then Tyler Shuck, obviously the story at pick 40, drafted as the QB3 in this class, which I don't think a lot of people had nailed down. I think that was a huge surprise to a lot of people. And then they rounded out their draft with some interesting depth pieces.
Yeah, it's a interesting pick with Tyler Shuck because you're setting yourself up to really have a lot of criticism over that selection if it goes wrong. I think the approach to it was this is someone that we think can be an instant contributor day one, and if it doesn't work out, we aren't too tied down to him with the lack of upside. A guy like Shedeur Sanders, I understand. We don't want to talk about him with every team that maybe take a quarterback in this class, but I do think it's a situation where they wanted to know right away, and if they aren't committed to the position, they can just go back in next year and get someone else. And I think with a younger guy like Sanders, there's a little bit more of that debate of should we really dump off a young quarterback without giving him time? And for an older quarterback, if you also think he's better immediately, it makes more sense. But with that first round pick, I really like Kelvin Banks. I know we're kind of separate on where we stand. You aren't necessarily like a hater on him, but you aren't as high. I think he can be a very exciting tackle, and I think with Fuaga, that's going to be a really exciting pair of bookends for the Saints there. And then Vernon Broughton, I think, is a really exciting defensive lineman that I think a lot of people had kind of wrong in the process. I think he's a very good run defender, and I think he can really kind of develop in that aspect and continue to grow to where he's probably going to be a future nose tackle in my mind. And I know a lot of people kind of have him pegged as this like pass rush kind of defensive lineman. I didn't see it as much. I felt like he was a lot more dependable in the run game, a lot more sturdy. And as he continues to develop his anchor, I think he's going to be a nice nose tackle for this team that desperately needs some run defense.
Yeah, my only question with this draft is if you're in a position to take a QB next year at like pick 3, are you just dumping Chuck? Are you just burning that 40th overall pick? And I mean, when you look at the advanced analytics, this is something that you should be doing. You should be always firing when you don't have your QB1. But from a more traditional standpoint, I just can't wrap my head around it.
Yeah, I understand the hesitancy, especially when it comes to like a young quarterback that you kind of want to give time to, but it wouldn't shock me if they're picking early and they say, "All right, we just got to do what we got to do. We like the options on the board. We'll see what happens." And maybe Shuck outperforms expectations. But heading to that day 3 haul, they got Danny Stutzman and Quincy Riley in the 4th round. In the 6th round, they added Devin Neal, running back out of Kansas, and in the 7th round, they added Mulkey Matavayo, the tight end out of UCLA, and Fadil Diggs, the edge rusher out of Syracuse. So, Bailey, this was an interesting draft for the Saints. Overall, they added a lot of new pieces, but at the same time, they desperately needed some new pieces to their roster. So what do you think overall, and what do you think of their day 3 picks?
Yeah, after their not in my eyes questionable days 1 and day 2, I wanted to hate on their day 3 a little bit more, but I feel like they got a lot of solid players out of here, a lot of potential stars, or at least a lot of potential contributors. I want to highlight Quincy Riley, one of the most productive cornerbacks in this draft, and somebody that they really needed in their cornerback room, which has kind of been thin with Paulson and Debo walking, and some of the draft picks they brought in haven't worked out the way they have to. I think Riley's someone who can compete for some that CB4 spot, and even maybe CB3 rotate in for some snaps there. So I thought that was a great pick at 131.
Yeah, the pick I loved was Devin Neal. I think he's going to be an absolute stud for the Saints. And Kamara's getting a little bit older. You can't rely on him consistently year to year. as much. And I think if you can have him a little bit more fresh, getting some rotation from Devin Neal, that's going to be a very exciting running back tandem. And eventually I expect Neal to kind of be the starter once Kamara's older and away from the game. So what are you giving this draft as a whole? What's your grade?
I gave it a C minus, and really, I don't dislike the value they got their guys on. Just what the ranges they're in, it's just a personal disagreement with me on the players that they took. So as a strategy, I mean, I don't absolutely hate it. I think like they went in knowing what they wanted to do and came out with the pieces that they need. I would like to see maybe another wide receiver there, but I mean, all in all, I feel like this is a pretty solid draft. But I just wish they took some players that I personally liked more.
Yeah, I gave it a B plus. I like a lot of the players that they took, so I'm okay with it. Shuck isn't necessarily like this disaster pick for me, like a lot of people seem to indicate. And I think guys like Devin Neal, Danny Stutzman on day 3 are great picks and great dart throws for potential contributors. So I'm excited to see what this team can do. And they're not necessarily on the greatest trajectory right now. So if they can hit on some drafts, that'll change around their fortune very quickly. And I think they can potentially get that in this class. So moving forward now to the New York Giants, a team that had a pretty busy night one. They got Abdul Carter with their 3rd pick, and then they traded back into the 1st round and selected Jackson Dart, quarterback out of Ole Miss. And then in the 3rd round, they added Darius Alexander, the defensive lineman out of Toledo. Bailey, the big emphasis is on quarterback. Is Dart a guy that can kind of save this franchise and keep the regime in town?
I mean, if you take Dart here, you're basically giving Dable and Schoen 2 more years at minimum, and I think he's in a really good spot. This is probably the best landing spot that Dart could have ended up with. No pressure to start year 1. You have 2 startable QBs ahead of you, and Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston, and Abdul Carter, one probably a lot of people's number 1 defensive prospect on the in the class. You just get at number 3, and that's going to be a very crowded and very talented edge room. And I like to trade back in to get him. If you like a QB, you just got to take it. That's always been a mentality that I've subscribed to, and you didn't give up a lot to kind of grab him, and then you still get Darius Alexander, a very, very talented defensive tackle in round 3. So the Giants have to be thrilled with this day 1 and 2 haul.
Yeah, I don't love Dart. I think that's my big holdup here with this class. I don't think Dart is necessarily going to be a good NFL quarterback. I trust Dable. I think he's a very good quarterback developer, but I don't know. I'm a little concerned there, and I think that might be what is the final pin in this regime. I love Carter. I love a lot of their picks in this draft, and we'll talk about a lot of them a little bit more later. But it really all hinges on Dart, and I'm not sold on what he is. So not as high on this class just because of the quarterback misfire in my mind. Moving forward to their day 3 selections, they had Cam Scatabo, the running back out of Arizona State, in the 4th round. In the 5th round, they added Marcus Bowe, the offensive lineman out of Purdue. And then they came back in the 7th round, added Thomas Fidone, the tight end out of Nebraska, and Corey Black, the cornerback out of Oklahoma State. Just 4 selections, but I feel like they did pretty well with them. What do you think, Bailey?
Yeah, 4 selections, 4 picks that I feel like they pretty desperately needed. I want to talk about Scatabo the most here. A guy that had a lot of fans in this draft process, and maybe a guy who could have gone in the first 2 days, but he slides a little bit. You get him at the top of round 4, and he's a great complement to Tyrone Tracy. Tracy's still, the wide receiver convert to running back, so you still maybe don't want to give him every responsibility in the world, and you do want to cycle him out a fair bit. And when they did cycle him out, they had like Devin Singletary in there who wasn't great. So this is a lot of somebody with a lot of juice, a very unique player. I feel like as a running back who can give you a lot of stuff that, I mean, Tracy offers too. It's kind of a bigger backfield too. So very, very like this, very much like this pick for the Giants.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a very fun duo in the backfield. I really like Thomas Fidone, the tight end, in the 7th round. I think he has all the athletic upside in the world. And I feel like it's kind of a repetitive trend where these guys that are injured kind of showcase what they can do in that final season, and then they come into the NFL and they really kind of are shown to be great value. And I think Thomas Fidone has that potential. He's a really nice pass catcher, really great athlete, good, solid mass, sturdy pass catcher in the open field. I think he's going to be someone that can really sneak up in this depth chart and maybe make a more notable splash than people are expecting right now out of a 7th round pick. So what are you giving this draft as a total for your overall grade?
I give it a B plus, and I think a lot of the focus is going to be on Jackson Dart. But if we kind of remove Jackson Dart from this class, if I just look at this is probably like an A minus draft. So even my personal evaluation of Dart aside, which I feel like I am not like low on him as some people are. I do think there's an NFL starter here, and I do think that's a risk you have to take if you're Dable with your job hanging over your head. So I don't mind the desperation move up just as a pure job saving thing. And every other pick, I feel like they really nailed. So can't give it an A just because I'm not the biggest fan of Jackson Dart, but I feel like I'm not as much of a hater, and I love their other picks too much to give it anything lower than a B plus.
Yeah, I still give it a B. I don't like Dart, and I wish it was like Milrow, and I'd be way higher on this class, honestly. But when you look at some of their other picks, I think they just absolutely knocked it out of the park. I think Carter's going to be a star off the edge. Darius Alexander is a very sturdy, dependable defensive lineman that will probably get a little underappreciated in his career just because he's not this like super flashy player, but he's just super, super reliable, and I think that's huge. I think Scatabo is going to make a contribution. I think Bo has an opportunity to maybe take over a guard or starting in center spot. And I think Fidone's going to be a steal. So not necessarily disrespect Corey Black. I just didn't watch him as closely as the other guys. So I really like this haul, and I think the Giants did pretty well. It's just now going to come down to, is Jackson Dart going to be an NFL quarterback? And if he is, this could easily be one of the best classes in the draft. So going forward to the New York Jets now, they decided to go with Armand Membu with the 7th pick of the draft. Then they followed it up with Mason Taylor in the 2nd round and Zaire Thomas, cornerback out of Florida State in the 3rd. Bailey, busy first 2 days for the New York teams. Jets stayed put, didn't have a lot of big splashy moves, but they got some good guys. What do you think of their overall day 1 and 2 work?
Yeah, the early rumors out of the Jets is that they were looking at Tyler Warren at pick 7. I was just praying that they did not do that, and they didn't. And they got Armand Menboop, somebody who I identified really early in the process, somebody that I loved, and he shot up draft boards. So just a great pick here, instant starter at that right tackle position. And you look at the Jets' offensive line on paper, that is a very, very good offensive line. That's a 5 deep offensive line where you don't really have any bad starters or anybody you're super worried about. So this completes their O line, and they are so well set up for 2026. And then they continued that with adding Mason Taylor, tight end, a position the Jets have been looking for a very, very long time. This is somebody who's probably just going to be a dependable, solid starter at pick 42. I don't hate that out of your tight end position. And then Azrae Thomas, the Jets do need another cornerback, and this is somebody who kind of fits in what they look for out of the corners, kind of doesn't force them to kind of switch their scheme and continue to do the things that have made them so successful in the past.
Yeah, I really like the selections that they made. I don't think anyone's necessarily going to be jumping off the page in a few years where you're saying, whoa, like what a steal. But I do think each and every pick is going to be guys that can stick around. Mason Taylor feels like one of the highest floor prospects in this class. I think he just has such dependable play at the tight end position to where he can kind of be in that Jake Ferguson, Cole Kmet type bucket. And I think for the Jets, that's all you really need. You know, you want that sturdy, dependable play. The only question that I had is I would have probably liked to see them go receiver in this draft. I feel like outside of Garrett Wilson, there's really a lack of contributions at that receiving spot. So I would like to see them address that position somewhere in these first 2 days. But overall, I think that the players that they grabbed are pretty impressive. So I'm excited for what they can do and the impact they can make for this Jets team. Moving forward to day 3, in the 4th round, they got a receiver, Arian Smith, wide receiver out of Georgia. Then in the 4th round, they added Malachi Moore, the defensive back out of Alabama. And then they had 2 more picks in the 5th round, Francisco Makinoa, linebacker out of Miami, and Tyler Barron, edge rusher out of Miami. Bailey, they were clocked out early on day 3, but what were your thoughts on their picks?
Yeah, Arian Smith is someone who is just always going to go on this range. And like Isaac Slough from last year or from earlier when we were talking about the lines, you just hope that your team isn't the one to do it. These guys have a terrible track record in the NFL. And I'm hoping Arian Smith can kind of buck that trend, but I'm not holding my breath on him. But the pick I want to talk about is Malachi Moore, safety from Alabama. This is somebody who every year kind of in the draft cycle had a lot of hype, and he came out and it kind of all evaporated. But when you look at the Jets depth at their safety position, there isn't a lot of contributors there. And Malachi Moore is someone who probably is that safety 3 in that room. And Aaron Glenn has that amazing track record with developing safeties, what he did with Kirby Joseph and Brian Branch. So I'm very excited for Malachi Moore, and I think he can be an impact starter for them down the line.
Yeah, I feel like Moore had a pretty good year, but it just no one wanted to hype him again, I guess. I don't know, prospect fatigue or something, but good player, and I'm excited to see what he can do. The guy I want to talk about is Francisco Makinoa, linebacker out of Miami, Florida. When he was at Washington State, he was making some incredible plays. Went to Miami, had a solid season, but was battling some injuries, and I think that kind of stalled his development and stalled his overall performance for the year. And I think that soured a lot of people on him. But as he got healthier, as he got more just fresh and 100%, he was making some plays again. I think he's someone that's going to be an absolute steal for this Jets team, and I think he can be a starting linebacker for this team in some time as he starts to earn snaps and earn that role, and I think he can work his way up the depth chart. So looking at the grades, I'm going to start off with this one. I gave this team a B for their draft. I feel like it's a lot of high floor picks. I think a lot of these guys may be safe, but eventually we're going to be looking back on it, and these are guys that are still sticking around on the roster. Besides maybe Arian Smith, there's a lot more high end, high bust rate type situation. For everyone else, I feel like it's high floor. So I like the draft as a whole. I feel like the Jets needed that stability and just that influx of just dependable contributors. But at the same time, I think there was some needs and some talent that I would have preferred more at some picks.
Yeah, I give him an A minus, and I don't disagree with your evaluation what they did, but even when we're doing mock drafts for this team, this was I feel like a team that's clearly building towards 2026, get into that high end range where you can take a QB. And the only knock I have against this draft is maybe they drafted too many high floor starters. They may knock themselves out of QB range just because they scrape a couple more wins, just because you have a dependable right tackle instead of somebody who gives up a couple more sacks. And Azrae Thomas maybe locks down a guy who runs you for a 70-yard TD and loses you a game. So that's literally my only worry with this class is that it might have been too much of a floor raiser for them looking to 2026.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what they do. I do like the picks of the players they made, so maybe I was a little too low on it. But moving forward to the Super Bowl champion, Philadelphia Eagles, they kicked it off with trading up one pick to add Jihad Campbell, linebacker out of Alabama. Then in the second round, they added Andrew Makuba, safety out of Texas. That was all they had for the first 2 days. Bailey, what were your thoughts on the picks?
Yeah, I mean, Jahad Campbell, I wouldn't necessarily call this a steal because he does have the shoulder injuries, but this is somebody who's definitely taken, I feel like, at the end of their range, and it sounds like they're using him as a pure edge rusher, which I'm very excited about that convert. When you look at him play that linebacker, it seems like he is an edge kind of forced to be a linebacker. So I feel like his transformation is going to be good. You saw how they turned around Bond. I don't have any, doubt in my mind that they're going to do the same with Jahad Campbell. This is just going to be another annoying Eagles steal. And then Andrew Makuba is somebody that when they traded away or let CJ, I don't know why I tried to go with his acronym. I'm forgetting his name. Chauncey Johnson, Gardner Johnson.
Gardner Johnson, yeah.
Gardner Johnson. Jesus. This is the only holes they had was at the strong safety position, and they fell it. And then you come into the draft with two needs, and you walk away with both of them filled. I feel like mission accomplished.
Yeah, I really like both these players, and I'm excited to see what Campbell will do as well. I liked his edge rushing ability. It wouldn't shock me if he's able to make it really work on the edge rush and create some pass rush production and just terrorize quarterbacks in that backfield. Kuba, though, highly instinctual safety. That's going to be a playmaker for this team. A little bit undersized, so it kind of reminds me of Sidney Brown in that way where the scrappiness and the playmaking and instincts were there, but the size is still a concern. I think it'll work for Kuba, but I also thought the same thing for Sidney Brown, so we'll see. Moving forward to their day three selections, they took Ty Robinson in the fourth round. In the fifth round, they had three picks: Mac McWilliams, defensive back out of UCF, Smail Munden, the linebacker out of Georgia, and Drew Kendall, center out of Boston College. Then in the sixth round, they had four picks: Kyle McCord, quarterback out of Syracuse, Miles Hinton, offensive tackle out of Michigan, Cameron Williams, offensive tackle out of Texas, and then Antoine Powell-Ryland, edge rusher out of Virginia Tech. Six selections with those last two rounds and Ty Robinson as well. Seven selections as a whole for day three. What do you make of the whole?
Actually, eight selections. Sorry, I just had to count it real quick. Um, this was very busy team on day three, and I could talk about any of these guys, but the guy I want to highlight is Kyle McCord, somebody who I felt like should have been probably a round three or round four draft prospect. The guy around six, I feel like this guy is a better backup than Kenny Pickett. When Jalen Hurts got injured last year, they put in Pickett, and I mean he won the game for them, but I felt like they won in spite of him instead of because of him. And Kyle McCord is a great high floor backup QB who I feel you have a lot more confidence in when you need to give him a spot start and get him in the sixth round. You keep the contract low. This is just probably not somebody you would think of as the most interesting pick, but the Eagles have always been a team who highly values their backup. So getting McCord here in round six is very, very good.
Yeah, the guy I want to highlight is Cameron Williams, and really it's a mix of Williams and Hinton, two very intriguing traitsy tackles that really have a pathway to being Lane Johnson's successor at that right tackle position. Jeff Stoutland, one of the best offensive line developers in the NFL, so both guys are going to be working with the absolute best development paths in the NFL or in the league, and one of them is probably going to take over as the future for this roster, and It's just ridiculous. I mean, the Eagles continue to find ways to draft extremely well. Howie Roseman is a very good general manager, and he makes his money here in April, and he just continues to do it here in 2025 as well. So for a draft grade, I gave this one an A minus, and I just think that it's really hard to nitpick too much. Ty Robinson is someone that I'm intrigued by, but I didn't necessarily think he's like the greatest one-for-one replacement of Milton Williams. Mac McWilliams is the guy I'm a little less intrigued by at the cornerback position. I felt like they could have added someone that's more of a boundary guy. Really, it's just that boundary cornerback position that I still have a lot of question marks about, and that's where they kind of lost a few points in my grade book, but still just an absolute impressive haul that I'm excited about for this Philadelphia Eagles team.
Yeah, the Eagles are one of those teams who are a bit suffering from their own success, and they've bled a lot of talent over the last couple of years in terms of their depth and their stars who eventually left to go start somewhere else. So, and this day three, they really nailed it. I feel like they got a lot of developmental prospects at spots that they need, and they kind of restocked the cupboard. Like I said, for another team before, I forget which team I said that about, but this is a really, really solid draft for the Eagles here. So yeah, give them an A minus.
So moving forward to the other Pennsylvania team, the Pittsburgh Steelers, they kicked it off with the 21st pick of the draft, and they took Derek Harmon. A lot of debate over that selection. They also had a third-round pick of Caleb Johnson, running back out of Iowa. A lot of debate over that selection. Bailey, what were your thoughts on their first 2 days of the draft?
Yeah, a lot of debate that I guess did not end up being a lot of debate considering what they did later in the draft. So yeah, Derek Harmon, defensive tackle from Oregon, I feel like there's someone who fits next to Cam Hayward very well. And that defensive line, and gives them a very, very scary front four that's going to be terrifying to watch. And when Cam Hayward ages out, there's your successor. I feel like he's such a versatile piece, play him in any position you want. And Caleb Johnson, a great fit in that Steelers scheme, what Arthur Smith likes to do with his running backs. And they obviously retained Jalen Warren, but you still are looking for that starter. And I think Caleb Johnson is that starter that they need out of the running back position.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a class that kind of gets dictated by what Shador becomes in the NFL, especially in division. But overall, I mean, Derek Harmon's a good player on that defensive line, a guy that I think is disruptive and able to kind of create some plays and on a defensive line that has so much attention going to other pieces and guys like TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, Cam Hayward. He's going to be able to continue to disrupt and create impact because you can't possibly put all your offensive linemen and focus enough on each and every guy. So he's probably going to be the beneficiary of that. Caleb Johnson's a very exciting outside runner that's going to be creative and productive as a speed back, and I'm excited to see what he can do in this offense, and I like his fit playing off of Jalen Warren for this team. Going forward to their day three selections, Jack Sawyer, the edge rusher out of Ohio State in the 4th round. In the 5th round, they added Yahya Black, the defensive lineman out of Iowa. In the 6th round, they added Will Howard, quarterback out of Ohio State. And in the 7th round, 2 selections, Carson Bruner out of Washington and Dante Kent, cornerback out of Central Michigan. Bailey, interesting day 3, 5 picks that they made. Which one stands out to you?
Okay, I just want to preface this by, at the time of recording this, Aaron Rodgers has not yet signed with the Steelers. I feel like signs are pointing that way, but right now he's not. And let's consume that he's not going to. Will Howard would probably be my pick as my favorite here. If you look at their QB room, and I tell you at the end of preseason and going into week 1 that Will Howard outplayed every QB in that room and is the starter, I wouldn't be shocked. I'd probably be the expectation for me. He's somebody who I feel like is a pretty high ceiling, or not high ceiling, high floor QB prospect who kind of come in and execute the offense that you need. So yeah, that pick 185, if you're able to get somebody who can even serviceably start for you at QB for 1 year, I feel like that's a great pick.
Yeah, we don't need to operate as if he's not going to sign with the Steelers. This is what's going to happen. He's going to wait until all the voluntary stuff is over with, so then he doesn't come off as a bad teammate for skipping last year with the Jets. He'll be like, oh, yeah, I just didn't know what I was going to do. I was really kind of on the fence if I wanted to play, and eventually I got the itch again, and the Steelers wanted me. Wow, what a coincidence. He's playing for the Steelers next year, but it wouldn't shock me if this is a team that's sitting 7-6, 6-7, a little disappointing. And then Will Howard comes in, end of season, and is able to produce enough production to where they give him another year as starter. The guy I want to talk about, though, is Jack Sawyer, the edge rusher out of Ohio State, a guy that is going into a very crowded room. But TJ Watt is getting older, so they're going to need someone to replace him. Jack Sawyer is a very impressive, highly developmental type piece that I think continues to get better each year. Showed some decent athleticism, has some nice size. He's not necessarily as bulked up for a guy at his size, but he still has some nice play strength. I think getting to operate as a stand-up rusher, rotating off of Alex Highsmith and TJ Watt, he's going to have a chance to really kind of produce and develop on that right track to where he can be the long-term starter for this team, especially in the post-Watt era for the Steelers squad. So draft grading every single pick that they made. What do you come away with for the Steelers team?
I came in with a B plus. I really like the Derek Harmon and Caleb Johnson pick, and I hope I just wanted to separate the Shedeur talk from this. I'm just going to operate this separate from Shedeur, and assuming Aaron Rodgers signs, I'll give this a B plus. But I mean, this could easily be a disaster draft for the Steelers. Looking back on it, Jack Sawyer was somebody that you just highlighted that you like, but felt like there's a bit of a luxury pick as your edge four. There's some other other positions I would have liked to see addressed by the Steelers here, but I still do really like this draft, so I'm confident in the B plus.
Yeah, in a vacuum, I don't hate this class, but I mean, let's acknowledge it for what it is. It's going to come down to how Shedeur is in the NFL, and if they fail to have a quarterback that kind of really takes them to that next level, and Shedeur just ends up like a great value for the Browns, a lot of people are going to most point to the Steelers out of every other team because he was linked to the team so much during the draft process. He's in the same division, and they desperately need someone at that spot. So it'll be interesting to see. I still think the players themselves are going to be productive. I think Caleb Johnson is going to be a fun pairing with Jaylen Warren. So I don't hate the draft, and I gave it a B as well. Moving forward to the Seattle Seahawks, a team that is entering a new era with Geno Smith gone. They spent their first-round pick on Gray Zabel, offensive lineman out of North Dakota State. Then in the second round, they had two selections and took Nick Emanwari, safety out of South Carolina after trading up. Then they added Elijah Arroyo, tight end out of Miami. And then in the third round, they made the call to take Jalen Milroe, quarterback out of Alabama. Bailey, high upside with these selections. What were your thoughts on these picks?
Yeah, this was an interesting class for the Seahawks, kind of taking maybe some lower value position here. Gray Zabel, interior offensive lineman, somebody who can kind of play all three slots on the interior offensive line. He's going to start for them. It just matters who plays the worst out of the other options, and you just slide him in the other one. I really like that, and I really like that aggressive move to trade up for Nick Emanwari. With that, in the second, give up on your thirds to do that. Great piece for them. Somebody who maybe should have gone round one, and they're able to take him right before the cliff on safety started. I'm not sure when the next safety was taken after Emanwari, honestly, but I feel like it was a couple picks. So really good to get him, get the last guy on the tier there. And Elijah Arroyo, somebody that I'm not super high on at pick 50, and they kind of already have Noah Fant, who does a similar thing to them. So I'll be interested to see how they utilize him. And Jalen Milroe, somebody that, I was initially high on the draft class, and then I fell out of favor with him, and now I've kind of split the difference between them. I think this is great value at 92. You're not going to get a better developmental prospect than him at the QB position, especially at pick 92, especially with the other QBs that are in this class. So all in all, a really, really good Seahawks day 1 and 2.
Yeah, if you told me that they took Zabel, Emanwari, or Milroe at 18, I mean, I would have been shocked about Milroe, but I wouldn't have hated the player taken. So I'm very excited for this draft class. Obviously, Sam Darnold had a great year in Minnesota, but I think there is a very easy to notice outcome where he maybe doesn't have that same success, and they're left just in a QB void. But instead, they add a high upside option that can maybe bring some competition for the position, maybe be the long-term answer. And there's not a lot of pressure. You didn't have to spend like a high pick on this guy to where he's necessarily set in stone as a succession plan or going to take over the position. It's just, hey, you get an opportunity, and if you can make the most of it, then you will be the starter going forward. If not, we like Darnold and we have him under contract for a while. Zabel, I commend John Schneider for being able to break off of his draft habits, taking a high interior offensive lineman that I think has a lot of upside, a lot of potential to be a good guard or center. We'll see where he ends up. They're probably going to just see what happens. And then even Warrior's a guy that I felt like was an incredible fit for Mike McDonald. So I really like this fit and just overall selection here. Really great first 2 days, and I think it's going to set the Seahawks team in the right direction. Moving forward to their day 3 haul, they didn't have a 4th-round pick, but in the 5th round, they came up 3 times with Riley Mills, defensive lineman out of Notre Dame, Torrey Horton, wide receiver out of Colorado State, and Robbie Outs, the tight end out of Alabama. Then in the 6th round, they took Bryce Cabeldue, And then in the 7th round, they had 3 picks again. Damian Martinez, running back out of Miami, Florida. Mason Richmond, offensive lineman out of Iowa. And Ricky White, the wide receiver out of UNLV. They were busy on day 3. What do you think of the overall selections that they made?
I like these overall selections. I'm not sure about the double dip at tight end though, but I feel like they did pretty good to add to some depleted parts of their roster. The player I want to highlight is Troy Horton, the kind of surprisingly first pick that they spent on wide receivers, all the way at 166. I think a lot of people highlighted that as a position the Seahawks would target a little bit earlier, but when you look at the room, it's not bad. It's passable. Certainly not what Darnold was used to at the Vikings, but it's not bad. But Horton's somebody who I feel like I think they have 2 1-year starters. I'm not sure the contract cups on. Maybe it's like realistically a 1-year deal, but he's somebody that I feel like will develop as the wide receiver 5 or 4 in that room. And then when the wide receivers that they currently have in their roster kind of hit free agency, he's an option of a guy that you can comfortably slot in as your wide receiver 30 and maybe take another wide receiver in the draft next year. And that suddenly you revamped your wide receiver room very quickly. It's great to see a team like the Seahawks when use the term, it's not a rebuild, it's a retool. And I feel like this draft is definitely a retool and not a full rebuild for them.
Yeah, I think the guys that I want to talk about, I do like Horton and White. I think one of them could easily become the wide receiver 3 for this team. Maybe I'm even underselling them a little bit. So I'm excited to see what they can become for this team. But the guy that I want to talk about is Riley Mills, a guy that was a versatile kind of defensive lineman that could kick outside for Notre Dame. And in that Mike McDonald defense, where he's kind of able to operate as a defensive end in that 3-4 kind of base formation, I think he's going to be very exciting. He's a very sturdy, dependable player that I think made some really high impact plays for Notre Dame. I think a lot of the question marks that came on him were because he was playing in a defensive line that also had Howard Cross, who was really bad at run defense. I'm sorry if Howard Cross is checking this out. It was really atrocious, and I think a lot of that blame got passed on to Mills unfairly in a defense that's a lot better schemed up, a lot better supporting cast next to him. I think Riley Mills is going to shine and be a highly productive player. So I really like the value here in the 5th round. When it comes to draft grades, I'm giving it an A+. I think they've done everything you can really ask out of the draft. I think Eamon Wari is going to be a star. I think Zabel could be a very high-end starter for this team, and you need to kind of bolster that offensive line. I like the swings that they took on day 3, and I love Jalen Milroe's upside. I'm not saying Jalen Milroe is necessarily going to pan out, but there are like timelines where this guy can make a franchise-altering trajectory on his team, and I think Seattle's a team that could definitely afford to take that risk here in round 3.
Yeah, absolutely. I ended up giving them an A-, but this could easily be an A+ draft for them. The one pick that really sticks out like a sore thumb to me is Elijah Arroyo. I feel like this is just not a pick that's going to work out for them. It'll be like kind of a red stain on an otherwise pretty solid draft. But yeah, the upside of this draft really rides with Jalen Milroe. I feel like they got a lot of not low floor, but high probability starters with their other picks in day 1 and day 2. And Milroe is really going to make this class either hit the ceiling, but even if he doesn't reach it, I feel like it's still a very solid floor. So I'm pretty confident in this is going to be an A- draft when we look back on it.
Yeah, it's hard not to find some contributors when you have 11 picks, and I'm excited to see how many of these guys stick around for Seattle in the near future. Next up is the San Francisco 49ers, a team that dealt with the injury bug, dealt with a little bit of underwhelming play this past season, needed a big draft to kind of rebound, and they made some interesting picks. With the 11th overall selection, they had Mykel Williams. In the 2nd round, they added Alfred Collins, defensive lineman out of Texas. Nick Martin, the edge linebacker hybrid kind of out of Oklahoma State in the 3rd round. And Upton Stout, the slot cornerback out of Western Kentucky. First 2 days, Bailey, they addressed completely on the defense. What were your thoughts on their selections?
Yeah, this was a very interesting draft from 49ers. I feel like I'm saying that for every team, but I feel like their assessment of the roster was actually pretty close to my assessment of the roster. They basically rebuilt their defensive line in the first 5 picks of their draft, including a day 3 pick. And with Mykel Williams, a perfect fit, very similar to the Shamar Stewart pick for the Bengals. Get somebody who has such a solid foundation in the run defense with opposite, obviously, a star edge rusher, and just let him reach his potential. And that's what they did with Mykel Williams, a really, really great fit for that solid defense. Probably will be deployed pretty similarly to Eric Armstead, how he was there when he was with the 49ers. So this is a great fit, and I'm glad to see them make this selection, which seems like a no-brainer. They didn't overthink it. And the same thing with Alfred Collins. Their defensive line was pretty bad. They don't really have a lot of long-term starters there or any starters there. So Alfred Collins is somebody who I expect to start. Same with Nick Martin, replace the Dre Greenlaw hole they had in the roster after he left from free agency. Maybe a bit of a reach. I would have probably felt better about this pick if it was on day 3 and they replaced their linebacker this way. But they're like, hey, we need a will linebacker. Who's the best will linebacker here? And they just got Nick Martin. Upton Stout was somebody who I feel like it was a little confusing about the pick, but I feel like the idea is to have him play slot and move Lenore back to outside corner, especially the contract that they gave Lenore. That is not a slot cornerback contract. That is an outside cornerback contract. So I feel like they fix the defense here.
Yeah, I trust Saleh in his evaluation, so I assume he had a lot of influence in this draft and just wanting guys that would help shore up this defense. That was once the calling card for the team, but they've just lost so much talent over the years. I like Michael Williams a lot. I compared him to Chandler Jones, and that's not me being overzealous. They were very similar prospects coming in, and I think Michael Williams has the chance to really kind of become that next level type of edge rusher. And opposite of Nick Bosa, his job gets way easier. Alfred Collins is a guy that I think is intriguing. He has nose tackle size, but he's a little bit more athletic, has some hybrid flashes to where he can kind of be this high upside defensive player. I think he's going to be similar to Kinlaw and what we saw during his era in San Francisco and New York. Just a nice run stuffer, kind of defensive minded guy, but maybe doesn't ever capitalize on that ceiling that's perceived with him. Nick Martin is a guy that I feel like is very underrated in the process, kind of a smaller linebacker that just made a lot of great plays, really nice play speed. And I trust San Francisco, in their evaluation. If they say they like a linebacker, I'm going to trust it's probably going to be a very good player because Saleh just seems to hit on these kind of under the radar picks. Quincy Williams was one for New York Jets where, it's like everyone was like, man, who is this guy? This guy wasn't supposed to go off the board for a while. And then goes to the solid defense and is able to just really thrive in that role. I expect a similar kind of path to success for Nick Martin. Upton Stout, I didn't love the pick. I'll be honest. That's where things kind of started to question for me. And I think the big issue is this is a team that it's so evident that offensive line is something that you need to continue to build up. And Shanahan is just very stubborn in that regard. And they just failed to do it here in the first 2 days. And it wouldn't shock me if this is another season where San Fran really bounces back. They have a lot of their guys healthy, a lot of their star players are making those contributions, but that offensive line comes back to bite them when it really matters most. And I think it's something that they just it's very stubborn to continue to overlook the need. Moving forward to their day 3 selections, though, in the 4th round, they added C.J. West, defensive lineman out of Indiana, and Jordan Watkins, slot receiver out of Ole Miss. In the 5th round, they added Jordan James, the running back out of Oregon, and Marquez Siegel, the safety out of Kansas State. And then in the 7th round, they had 3 selections. They took Curtis Rourke, quarterback out of Indiana, Connor Colby, lineman out of Iowa, and Junior Burgeon, wide receiver out of Montana. Bailey, which pick stands out to you from this group?
Yeah, like I kind of alluded to when we were talking about the day 1, day 2, CJ West, I feel like in fact, this guy's going to start on their defensive line. I don't really see like anybody they're not better than. When we did the mock last year, before the draft, I did not know who CJ West is. So I turned on a little bit of tape, and I came away pretty impressed. I thought this was, a guy who, this is the range he should have gone in, but with the state of the 49ers defensive line, he's probably going to at least play pretty heavily. I feel like he was an underrated penetrator. I really liked his ability there. And maybe he's a guy who doesn't have the highest ceiling, but he has a really solid floor and somebody who I feel like can contribute a lot to the 49ers day 1.
Yeah, I feel like him and Caldwell are probably in a similar vein for a lot of these guys. And I wouldn't be shocked if the Chargers were a little upset when CJ West came off the board because he is just so stout in the run game. And he creates so much in that middle to where he can clog up the run and really kind of just create those opportunities for his team to where they're just able to the numbers when he's on the field, the impact that you see is just so impressive that it's just hard not to buy into what he can do as a run defense guy. And I think that, or I guess they took Caldwell earlier, but man, I don't know. Like it's that same vein of player. And I feel like San Francisco probably got the better one. Both guys very talented, but CJ West is going to make some noise in that run game and it might go underappreciated over the casual NFL fans, but for San Francisco, they're going to love him a lot. A guy that I like is Jordan James, the running back out of Oregon, a guy that maybe wasn't the flashiest athlete, but on tape, he was just making plays. He's shown that he can play second fiddle to Bucky Irving when he was at Oregon. He showed that he can take the lead back role this past season. So I'm just really excited to see what he can do. Very physical, very instinctual, and very intelligent runner that I think is going to continue to impress in that Shanahan run scheme that just seems to favor running backs, and I think he's going to capitalize on it. And it wouldn't shock me if this is a guy that is really helping McCaffrey stay fresh throughout the season, so that when the playoffs come, they can really kind of unleash him to kind of make that push in the postseason. So when it comes to grades, Bailey, where are you standing on the San Francisco draft class?
Yeah, I mean it's another arrogant San Francisco draft, but I can't hate on what they did. I would have loved to see offensive linemen here. We saw how much their offense kind of fell apart when Trent Williams went down, and I mean, there's not a guy you can take to replace Trent Williams, but you can at least try. Maybe at least try to take a tackle. There's several developmental guys that I feel like they could have taken, like Cam Williams, for example. The Eagles you had 1,000 like day 3 picks. Take him. Take somebody that at least you can like have some faith that they'll be able to take over for Trent Williams eventually, or even help him out in a pinch in this upcoming year. So I gave him a B. I really liked what they did in terms of rebuilding that defense. I just would have liked to seen an offensive lineman pick, or especially specifically offensive tackle.
I gave them a B as well. I feel like I really like Michael Williams. I think this is going to be a very good pick that ages extremely well. But I don't know. I felt like there was a lot of needs that they just ignored, and it's mostly in that offensive line unit. I think they just need to continue to upgrade that group. I would like to see maybe some more investment on the boundary for cornerback. I would have I just feel like Shanahan kind of gets in his own way sometimes, where he knows that he's going to help the offensive line with the scheme, but at the same time, like, you can have great players and have that beneficial scheme, and you're going to see a lot more opportunities open up for that offense. Maybe it won't hurt you in the regular season. Maybe you rebound this year and you have a great 49er season where you're going like 12-5, 13-4. But when you get into the thick of the playoffs in that deeper NFC slate against like a Philadelphia team that's just sending constant pressure, you're going to regret not having a much better offensive line. I think that's going to be the doom for this 49ers team this season, whether it's causing them not to make it very far into the standings, or whether it's late in the season when they're in the NFC Championship or divisional round and they fall just short. Moving forward to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they were probably one of the more surprising teams when it came to the selections they made, and they started off right away at 19, where they took Emeka Egbuka, wide receiver out of Ohio State. They continued on into the second round by adding Benjamin Morrison, the cornerback out of Notre Dame. And then in the third round, they added another cornerback, Jacob Parrish out of Kansas State. Bailey, Egbuka was not on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers prediction list for many people. What do you think of the pick, and what do you think of their overall first 2 days?
So just kind of separate my love of Egbuka away from the fact that Egbuka is a really talented wide receiver, and he just gets buried instantly on the chart. This is somebody who easily could have been a wide receiver 1 on a couple teams. I feel like several teams even, and now he's just going to be relegated to wide receiver 3 duties for who knows how long. I feel like the Buccaneers are kind of overreacting to all the injuries they had to the wide receiver room when they were rolling out some less than impressive starters there at the position. Said, hey, we cannot let this happen again. Let's just grab another wide receiver that we think is a wide receiver 1 quality, and we won't ever have to deal with this again. But I feel like there's a pretty major overreaction to what happened. Evans and Godwin are getting up there. Evans especially, and Godwin obviously has injury concerns, so it's like, oh well, if they get injured, we don't want to be screwed. But I mean, if they get injured, this is just planning for the worst, especially with your first round pick. Is just not, I feel like, smart team building. I would have liked to see a lot of other positions here, and then the Delta at corner is interesting. I feel like the Buccaneers came in with a need for corner. There's talks about trading or cutting Jamal Dean, and then they decided not to. So he's probably not too long for this Buccaneers team, and they needed some safety help too. They had to play Tyke Smith there in the slot role just because they didn't have any better options. So you take one of these guys, and you're probably going to slide him into the slot role, and then the other one's probably going to be the cornerback 4, and then next year these two are going to be starting. So I mean, it's not bad. I don't like hate the idea there, but I mean, there's other positions I would have liked to see filled, and I feel like the Buccaneers are lower on their own roster than kind of I am. I feel like they have a really solid team here, and this seems like, oh well, this is not yet. Maybe in a couple more years we'll be ready to compete. But I'd like to see them be a little bit more aggressive in addressing their needs.
Yeah, I think Parrish is going to be a really fun slot receiver. Egbuka is a weird pick. I'll be honest. I just don't get paying Godwin and then still coming into this draft and selecting Egbuka. I feel like you're overflowing a wide receiver room that I don't think needed this type of additions. Godwin, Evans, McMillan. I even like Trey Palmer as a wide receiver 4. I think that's a pretty good like group to have there. Raheem Jarrett was like a fine wide receiver 5 in my mind. Like I didn't hate him. So I don't know. It's just weird that then they came into this draft and they added 2 receivers. And there's some other positions on the scene that I feel like could have definitely used the help. I love the idea of them getting linebacker, and for them to go all rounds and not pick one is very confusing. For them to maybe not bolster up the defensive line, bolster up the offensive line. It's a little confusing in terms of ideology, and that's where the question is. It's not necessarily the players themselves, because I like most of the players they took, especially in these first 2 days. I like Igbuka, I like Morrison, I like Parrish, and I think all these guys can be long-term pieces for this team. It's just I didn't know if it really was the greatest approach of best value compared to best player available for what their grades were. So looking at their day 3 selections, they only had 3. They took David Walker, the edge rusher out of Central Arkansas. Then they double dipped edge rusher with Elijah Roberts out of SMU, kind of like a defensive lineman type. So he's probably going to be more in that Logan Hall and Kalijah Cansey group. And then Tez Johnson, wide receiver out of Oregon. Bailey, 3 selections on day 3. What were your thoughts on him?
I mean, Tez Johnson's a troll pick, right? They're just messing with us at this point, right? Like, you don't need another wide receiver. You probably didn't need to draft a wide receiver at all. Now you're drafting 2, and just insanity to me, man. David Walker is somebody who I thought was pretty productive out of Central Arkansas, and somebody who should be able to offer some snaps to them right away. You don't have a lot of interesting options or like upside guys in your edge room right now who can kind of come in and rush the passer. I think David Walker does add that, but I mean, coming out of this draft with no O-line, no linebacker, I feel like it's just a massive failure.
Yeah, it's a little confusing. I do want to talk about Tez Johnson because I think he's a very good player, but it feels like he might be limited to like wide receiver 5 with this current room, and maybe that's underselling like just how crowded it is, because even Trey Palmer is there that can keep him at wide receiver 6. So
he may not make the roster.
Yeah,
I wouldn't be surprised if he gets cut.
It's going to be tough for him, but he was a very productive wide receiver for Oregon. Ran a little bit slower than expected. And it feels like that just snowballed into him falling down draft boards. But I mean, he's a smaller guy that was still very like impressive on tape, and I feel like a lot of people were overreacting to speed times this year. I feel like the in-game athleticism is there, the nuance and pass catching and playmaking ability, all there for him to be successful in the pros. It's a hard path to see where he makes a contribution to this roster, but I think he's talented enough to at least stick around, or maybe get swapped somewhere on that like last cut day for 53s and find himself somewhere else where he can make an impact. So it's a weird draft. They only took 3 positions in 6 picks, maybe 4 if you want to call Elijah Roberts a defensive lineman. What do you grade this haul?
I gave it a C minus. I thought I was being too harsh on them, and then I looked at the picks again. I got upset again. This is not the draft the Buccaneers needed. I feel like this is what I don't know what their own expectations are for next year. Do you really think you're like competing for a Super Bowl with this roster, or are you just kind of treading water and hoping that you hit on something in the future? I'm not sure how they even evaluate their own future at this point. I come out of this draft confused more than anything with the Buccaneers.
Yeah, I gave it a C plus because the players are good. Like I don't have any issue with who they picked. It's just I feel like I don't know. It's just they didn't address like linebacker. Levante David continues to get older, even if he's a very good linebacker. Like you want some help in that second level. You want some help in that defensive line, and you want to bolster that interior offensive line more. And right now, the way they approach this draft is just it felt like they were drafting with luxury. Like if this was a team like the Chiefs, where they're just saying, "Oh yeah, like we're there already. Like we just need to add some playmakers, see who hits." I get it more, but you're a team that's on the outs right now, trying to push yourself up into that next tier of NFL contention. And I feel like this draft, the players with their first 2 days of picks is fine enough to where I'll give it a positive grade. But the ideology for this draft as a whole was just a little disappointing. I mean, even if they were to go and get like Stutzman round 4, I would have been a lot more supportive about it, even though I'm not as high on Stutzman as some other people were in this draft process. Like it's just getting those needs and getting those contributors that have pathways to play time. It would have been huge for the team.
Yeah, absolutely agree.
Moving forward now to the Tennessee Titans, Bailey, this is your team, and they were the team to open it up on draft night, selecting Cam Ward with the first overall pick. In the second round, they took Oluwafemi Oladejo, the edge rusher out of UCLA. And in the third round, they took Kevin Winston, safety out of Penn State. Very intriguing day 2 of picks. Obviously, we've talked about Cam Ward a little bit ad nauseum, but we can still talk about him some. But this day two is where things start to get a little more interesting for us. So talk about Ward, what you think he can do, but also let's hear your thoughts on the day two selections.
Yeah, Ward is someone who's obviously has the talent to go first overall. My greatest fear with the Titans is that they met Ward a couple times and they fell in love with the guy more than the player, which I feel like is a theme throughout their draft. And the players that they took more of a culture reset in this draft, which is what they're approaching. So, I mean, whenever you approach draft like that, it's fine when you take day three guys like that. When you're talking about the first overall pick, uh, you got to be, I don't know, maybe a bit more picky on who you, or a bit less picky on the attitudes you bring in. And Ward is somebody who I just hope it works out for the Titans at this point. I'm just praying. And his arm is obviously amazing, but there are a lot of red flags, a lot of question marks, and we'll see how we'll see how he pans out. I just hope they didn't make a mistake by not trading back with the Giants, taking advantage of a pretty desperate team for with a GM and head coach who are desperate to save their jobs. And move on to Oladejo, who's somebody that I liked, maybe more of a round three guy. I feel like they took him maybe at the top of the range. I do really like to trade back here though. There's a lot of talented players they could have taken at pick 35, which is where I think they traded back from. So trading back, picking up that day three or round three pick that they lost by trading for I don't know why every time I do this I blank on the players on my own team. The cornerback, L'Jarius Sneed.
Oh yes,
Jesus
Snead,
Christ.
yes.
Oh
I
my
was just,
God.
I was just confused on who you're referencing.
I
My bad.
know. My mind just completely goes blank when I try and think of players every time the camera's on. But yeah, and so I think they did a good job there. Kevin Winston, I don't think was a pick that a lot of Titans fans expected. Wide receiver is obviously a much bigger need. And I mean, Winston, we do need another safety. And he is somebody who I feel like if he played a little bit more, he would have gone a little bit higher, especially in maybe a weaker safety draft. So I'm not too upset by the pick there, but I mean, a lot of fans were upset it was not wide receiver.
Yeah, I like Ward. I agree with you that probably personality got him a few extra points, but I think the talent was there to where it warrants the first overall pick. And I do think having that personality and having that infectious energy as a quarterback is definitely huge for a culture and just having a locker room that's easy to buy in. So it'll pay off, I think. I think it'll be a good selection for them. Oladejo is an interesting player because he was a linebacker who converted to edge, and he made the splash plays that got him up on the draft radars. It was someone that was a little bit of a late riser in the process, but eventually worked himself all the way up to that second round. And he's a fun guy. I'm really excited to see what he can do in the league, especially as he continues to develop and get experience at edge. And then, yeah, Winston's a guy that I think is just very dependable, very reliable at safety, great size, great physicality, but also some really nice play instincts that I think makes him valuable in that back end at the safety spot. I agree with you. He probably would have went a little bit higher if he was healthy this year. So I like the value here for this Titans, even if strong safety wasn't necessarily like the biggest need for the team. Day three is where things are very interesting for the Titans. They started off with three fourth round picks, and they took Chimere Dike, wide receiver out of Florida, Gunnar Helm, tight end out of Texas, and Alec Iomanor, the wide receiver out of Stanford. Then they followed it up with a fifth round pick of Jackson Slater, the offensive lineman out of Sacramento State. And then in the sixth round, they had two picks where they took Marcus Harris, cornerback out of California, and Kalel Mullings, running back out of Michigan. Bailey, who stands out to you from this group?
I mean, all these guys stand out, honestly. I feel like they hit their needs very, very well in this day three, a very offense heavy draft where offense was clearly the problem last year. The defense, even without Snead, was pretty serviceable, but it's like defense ranked 13th, offense ranked 32. So not too surprising to see such an offense heavy draft. And the offensive player that I want to kind of focus on is Jackson Slater, somebody who may not seem like an important pick to the Titans this upcoming season, but Lloyd Cushenberry is coming off a torn ACL. Not quite sure if he's going to be ready week one to contribute to that team. Jackson Slater is somebody who, although he didn't primarily, or I don't think he ever started at center, somebody who did play there in the Senior Bowl, and someone who, if Lloyd Cushenberry isn't healthy week one, you can slide him in at center and he's fine. And then Kevin Zeitler is somebody who is on a 1 year contract, obviously a very, very, very good guard, but somebody who, again, is older, only on a 1 year contract, probably not going to be there the year after. And there's your right guard right there in Jackson Slater. So I feel like that was a very important and overlooked pick to the Titans, who took flashier players at other positions.
Yeah, the guy that I like is Ivan the wide receiver out of Stanford. He's a very physical possession receiver that can play in that like big body jump ball type guy. And I feel like Cam Ward's going to love him. he put up great tape against Travis Hunter in 2023, and that's like the big calling card for him for a lot of fans. But I think it's almost a discredit to reference his 2023 stuff when he has so much good stuff for 2024 as well. He's a very solid wide receiver, but at the same time, he tested pretty well. So he's not just this jump ball guy. Very physical, very impressive, just overall ball skills. And I think he can be a guy that plays opposite of Calvin Ridley on the boundary and is able to make contributions. Another guy I like, Xavier Restrepo, the undrafted free agent. I think he is going to make this roster, and I think he's going to make an impact for this team. Keep an eye on him. I understand the 40 was terrible. I don't care. The tape tells you all you need to know, and he is an absolute stud. Pairing back up with Cam Ward, I'm excited to see what he can do. So overall for this draft, I gave it a B plus. I feel like, obviously it all comes down to if Cam Ward is good or not, but there was a lot of great pieces that I think can stick around. Maybe not at the highest priority of positions. Like I think Oladejo is kind of like an edge 2 type guy, not someone that you're going to expect to be your primary edge rusher. Kevin Winston, I think, is going to be like a strong safety. Gunnar Helm, I think, can be that serviceable kind of tight end 2 or maybe very low floor tight end 1. But overall, I feel like a lot of these guys can stick around for this roster, help prop it up, and kind of lay that foundation as you enter that quick rebuild that I think they're planning to do with this team. But yeah, I gave it a B plus, and I really am excited to see what Cam Ward can do with this roster.
Yeah, I also give it a B plus, and I agree with you. Like with Oladejo, probably would have preferred to see somebody with more edge one upside there, especially if you're spending a round 2 pick on them. Winston also a safety 2 for them. Like it's gonna be their he's gonna start from he's still their second best safety on the roster, and then they attacked wide receiver and the pass catches pretty aggressively, and even Marcus Harris, somebody who's gonna be probably a contributor day 1 for them. And I feel like if you show a Titans fan this draft and don't tell them the order, they'd be pretty excited about it. And maybe some of the players aren't taking it exactly in the order that they would have liked, but this is a very, very solid draft for a roster that very desperately need a rehaul. And I mean, this is a great, great draft for the new GM.
Yeah, absolutely. So now we head to the last team on the agenda, the Washington Commanders, and they opened things up with the 29th pick where they got Josh Conerly, offensive lineman out of Oregon. They followed it up with their second round selection of Trey Amos, cornerback out of Ole Miss. Bailey, that's all they had for the first 2 days of the draft. What were your thoughts on them?
Yeah, Connolly, I feel like a lot of people did not tag O-line as a need for the Commanders, but I thought about it some more, and I saw that press conference. They kind of sold me on it. I feel like the Commanders kind of fell apart after Sam Cosmi had that injury, and who knows? I'm not sure if he's going to be healthy this year or when he's going to come back. So Connolly allows you to get kind of a plug and play starter at that guard position, Jesus Christ. And then in the future years, you can play tackle, kick Brandon Coleman, who had a very impressive rookie year, I feel like, at tackle inside 2. And this gives you 6 really good offensive linemen. And that's something clearly the Commanders value pretty highly. And I like the idea. And Trey Amos, obviously, someone who easily could have gone around 1, easily could have gone that Bills pick at 25. I don't think anybody would have blinked an eye. And getting him at 61 to a team that desperately needs outside corner help is such a steal for them. Very, very impressed with the Commanders day 1 and 2.
Yeah, Trey Amos, I mean, is a absolute stud. Going to be a first round talent. Even though he went round 2, like this is going to be a guy that is a long term starter for this team. I think they knocked it out of the park. Josh Conerly is an exciting pass blocker, and I think he's someone that's going to develop, whether that's at guard or at tackle. I believe in him. Whatever they do, they're going to figure it out. They're going to find ways to make this line work, and I think the picks are going to be fine. And I'm never going to hate on a team that says, hey, we want to be better in the offensive line, because, I mean, you see a lot of teams make their identity that, and they're able to really build up a great foundation and create a lot of success on offense with that. So I'm excited for it, and overall, I think they made some really exciting picks here that will pan out very well. Moving forward to their day 3, they only had 3 selections. In the 4th round, they took Jalen Lane, wide receiver out of Virginia Tech. In the 6th round, they took Kane Medrano, linebacker out of UCLA. And in the 7th round, they took Ja'Cory Crossy-Merritt, running back out of Arizona. This just 3 picks. Very short list here. But do you have one that stands out to you?
Yeah, I mean, I like all these picks, honestly, but just to go back to offensive line real quick, I mean, look at the Commanders division. All of the teams in their division either added an edge rusher on day 1, or then the Cowboys added Ezra, who was probably seen as a day 1 player in the league. So very, very scary division to be in. So can't knock them too much on taking tackle and just being kind of cautious on that. In terms of player I want to talk about, Jalen Lane was somebody who is a pretty electric player for them. They needed a wide receiver. I mean, they made do with some scraps I would say in Jalen Lane is somebody who I feel like can develop into a startable wide receiver, and he does offer value right away with his punt return experience. He should start from them there, so very, very much like that pick there.
Yeah, I think he's a De'Ami Brown replacement, almost one for one. I'm really excited to see what he can do in the league. Corey Krosky-Merritt is a guy who stands out to me. I think that running back room definitely needed some juice and some playmaking ability, a speed guy on the outside that can catch the ball. And Krosky-Merritt has that. He kind of reminds me of Charkandrick West, if you guys remember him, the running back for the Chiefs. I think he can make that kind of impact where he's kind of a flashy, splash type guy. And I think Washington has an open opportunity for someone to take that running back role. I like Brian Robinson. I think he's good at what he does in the short game and as a power back, but I think he needs someone who can kind of keep him fresh that can play off him, come in on passing downs, and take some reception opportunities. And I think Krosky-Merritt can be that for this team and really be a sneaky round 7 value for the squad. So overall, we look at our grades, and Bailey, I'm going to let you start because you seem blown away with it.
Yeah, I mean, I give them an A. The only thing that I will hate on is that they did not get an edge rusher, and I felt like they really, really needed an edge rusher. But if Dan Quinn says I don't need any edge guys, you probably just listen to him at this point. And even if he likes the guys he has in there, I'm not going to argue with him. And getting Connerly, who's someone who I feel like really ups the floor of that offensive line, and Trey Amos, who instantly solves a lot of issues with their coverage. You can move Mike Sandersville back to maybe his natural position at nickel and have Amos play on the outside, and you address linebacker, you get that wide receiver 4 or 3 that you're looking for. And I mean, I personally would have gone edge, but I can't. I really like the players they took here, so A.
Yeah, I gave it a B plus, but I could probably be convinced on A minus. I really like Amos and Connerly in those first 2 days, and I really like Lane, and I think he can be a high impact splash play type receiver. Very exciting haul for such a limited draft capital, and yeah, I mean this is a Washington team that is obviously looking to build off of what was a very impressive last season, and if they can get some contributors that are coming from this class, even with the limited amount of picks, it could help them maybe take those next steps and maybe make a push for that Lombardi. Well, that's all we have for you here on 2 Minute Drill, and those are the draft grades. We hope you guys enjoyed it, and we are going to be rolling out with 2026 content very soon. So keep an eye on our page, stick around, subscribe to the channel if you aren't. Thank you for all your support throughout the cycle, and we hope you guys continue to enjoy us because we got more coming. I'm Michael Rochman, that's Bailey Kumar, and that's the 2 Minute Drill.